Chapter 231. The White Deer Institute could be considered a rather famous power in the Moon continent. Although it couldn't be compared to the other transcendent powers, it was still quite famous. Moreover, White Deer Academy very rarely fought with other powers, so no one knew exactly how strong White Deer Academy was. Many people guessed that there might be some extremely formidable figures hidden within White Deer Academy, but they kept a very low profile. Of course, this was only a guess. White Deer Academy kept a low profile and didn't form enmity with others, so it was impossible for anyone to act against White Deer Academy for no reason. Not only that, the reputation of the White Deer Institute had always been extremely good. This power was proficient in the Tao of Divine Inscriptions, and they even had many unique divine inscriptions that were extremely powerful. When used to inscribe divine weapons, there would be unimaginable effects. However, the White Deer Institute didn't specialize in weaponsmithing, they only taught people the Tao of Divine Inscriptions. Naturally, if one wanted to learn the Tao of Divine Inscriptions in the White Deer Institute, they had to pay a certain fee, yuan meteor stones. One couldn't help but say that the White Deer Institute's method of obtaining yuan meteor stones was different from the rest. They relied on their own proficiency in divine inscriptions to impart knowledge to others in exchange for payment. Qin Wentian could easily find out what kind of power White Deer Academy was, and he couldn't help but sigh in his heart. As the saying goes, great hermits hide in the city. The White Deer Institute was precisely like this. Most probably, no one knew that the White Deer Institute was actually a branch of the Azure Emperor Palace. Qin Wentian and the other two arrived outside the academy. The building in front of them was not magnificent, but it was exquisite and elegant, giving people a refreshing feeling. There were people going in and out of the White Deer Academy, and there were also many people waiting outside. "Hey, you're here too." Fatty Fan Li's eyes brightened. In front of them, there was a beautiful woman clad in jade green robes. It was none other than the woman they had met on the way here. The female couldn't help but suspect Fan Li's motives when she saw him frowning. "Are you here to learn divine inscriptions as well?" Qin Wentian asked, causing the suspicions in the girl's heart to lessen as she nodded. "Just nice, my name is Fan Lu." "Beautiful, how about you?" Fatty stretched out his hand, only to be completely ignored. "Qin Wentian." Qin Wentian nodded to the woman with a smile. "Leng Ning," the woman replied. "Is the little animal in your arms a demonic beast?" "So beautiful." Little Rascal's head popped out from Qin Wentian's robes as it lazily glanced at Leng Ning. Moments later, its eyes brightened as it leapt forward, directly leaping towards Leng Ning. Leng Ning stretched her hands out, only to see Little Rascal leaping into her embrace. Looking at her with a smile in his eyes, Little Rascal rubbed his head against her chest, appearing extremely comfortable. "What a cute little fellow." Leng Ning's countenance was originally as cold as ice, but at this moment, a smile appeared on her face as she gently stroked Little Rascal's body. Seeing Little Rascal closing his eyes in enjoyment, Fatty Fan Lu placed his hands on his hips. "What a perverted dog. There are so many people here. Are there always so many people wanting to enter the White Deer Institute to study divine inscriptions?" Qin Wentian surveyed the surroundings as he walked towards Leng Ning. "Are you an outsider?" Leng Ning looked up at Qin Wentian. "Emichim, I came from very far away," Qin Wentian replied. "No wonder, the White Deer Institute only recruits students once a month. Your luck is not bad, and the duration of the training period is also 1 month. If you have talent in the Tao of Divine Inscriptions, you will be able to continue cultivating here. If not, the White Deer Institute wouldn't waste your time. But of course, if you have extraordinary attainments in the Tao of Divine Inscriptions, you might even have a chance to become a guest elder of the White Deer Institute." Leng Ning's first impression of Qin Wentian wasn't bad, hence she patiently explained. "Oh yeah, how is your attainment in the Tao of Divine Inscriptions?" "If your attainment is too low, there's no need to waste yuan meteor stones," Leng Ning added. It wasn't that she was looking down on Qin Wentian, but rather, she was speaking from the bottom of her heart. "Should be, I guess I can be considered outstanding." Qin Wentian replied in a low voice. Actually, with his attainment in the Tao of divine inscriptions, he could even guide others. I believe that you came from a faraway place. Leng Ning rolled her eyes at Qin Wentian. Outstanding. In terms of attainment in the Tao of divine inscriptions, how many people would dare to say that they were outstanding? This fellow looked extremely handsome, but it seemed like he was exaggerating. Maybe, he didn't know how high the attainments in the Tao of divine inscriptions were. As long as you participate in the examination, you will have to pay a fee of 10 third-layer yuan meteor stones. You have to think this through, Leng Ning advised with good intentions. So expensive? Qin Wentian blushed with shame. If this was placed in the Chu country, it would already be considered a terrifying amount of wealth. Many adventurers risked their lives just to obtain this amount of wealth, but it was already extremely difficult, or even impossible. Leng Ning was even more certain of her conjecture when she saw the look of astonishment on Qin Wentian's face. This fellow really didn't know what was going on outside. As long as you have a high attainment in the Tao of divine inscriptions, you would be able to forge weapons. At that time, would you still be worried that you wouldn't be able to obtain yuan meteor stones? Leng Ning glared at Qin Wentian as she continued, not only that, divine inscriptions are the foundation of the Tao of formations. A powerful divine inscriptionist would not only be able to become a grandmaster weaponsmith, they would also be able to inscribe powerful formations. I see. Qin Wentian nodded his head. Formations were something he had never heard of in the Chu country. What a small place. Is the White Deer Institute's attainment in the Tao of divine inscriptions very high? Qin Wentian asked again. In his heart, he really wanted to know how strong the foundations of the hidden faction of the Azure Emperor Palace were. Leng Ning was completely speechless. She rolled her eyes at Qin Wentian but didn't say anything, causing Qin Wentian to awkwardly smile on his face. Everyone. After a period of time, an old man appeared outside the White Deer Institute. Staring at the crowd, he smiled, "Follow me in." The crowd nodded their heads as they followed the old man into the institute. The White Deer Institute was actually the White Deer clan. However, they seemed to prefer the name Institute. Inside the institute, there were pavilions and pavilions, with small bridges and flowing streams. The old man brought the crowd to a stone wall. On this stone wall, there were many divine inscriptions engraved on it, giving off a sense of sharpness, causing the eyes of those who looked at it to sink into it. The power of divine inscriptions lay in the fact that they contained an indescribable power. The inscriptions interweaved together to form a mysterious diagram that could unleash a unique effect. Qin Wentian could tell with a single glance that the divine inscriptions engraved on this stone wall were all second-ranked divine inscriptions. Even if he was the one inscribing the divine inscriptions, he wouldn't be able to do much better. The person who inscribed these divine inscriptions could be considered to be an extremely good second-ranked divine inscriptionist. If the divine inscriptions had a little more grace, it would be even more perfect. What a pity. Qin Wentian murmured, his words causing Leng Ning to be stunned. She felt that these divine inscriptions were incomparably exquisite. At the very least, she wouldn't be able to replicate them. However, after hearing Qin Wentian's tone, this fellow was truly exaggerating. Yet his expression was as though it was only natural, causing everyone to be speechless. What big words you have there. A mocking voice drifted over. Qin Wentian shifted his gaze over, only to see a young man clad in yellow robes coldly laughing at him. This divine inscription is a work of nature. Each stroke of the divine inscription is so perfect that there are no flaws at all. Yet in your words, it's a pity. After speaking, he shifted his gaze onto Leng Ning as he laughed. Leng Ning, is this your friend? Leng Ning furrowed her brows. This fellow was here as well. It seemed like he was intentionally looking for trouble when he saw that Qin Wentian was together with her. Although this divine inscription was already extremely powerful, with her judgment, she could still tell that there was still a gap between perfection and perfection. This young man was naturally able to tell as well, yet he still intentionally said those words. Yan Kong, what does this have to do with you? Leng Ning icily retorted. Yes, it has nothing to do with me. I'm just worried that you've met a bad friend, and you're too full of yourself. Yan Kong laughed, his words causing the gazes of the crowd to shift in their direction. Fan Lu narrowed his eyes as he stared at Yan Kong. A cultivator at the 3rd level of Yuanfu, someone that Chu Mang could kill with a single slap, actually dared to be so arrogant? Leng Ning, who is this idiot? Fan Lu asked, his words causing Leng Ning to freeze. Idiot? Since he knows that this has nothing to do with him, why is he spouting nonsense? If he isn't an idiot, then what is he? Fan Lu stared at Yan Kong with traces of sympathy in his eyes, causing Yan Kong's countenance to stiffen as he stared at Fan Lu with a cold glint in his eyes. Hee hee. Leng Ning laughed lightly, she discovered that this fatty didn't seem so loathsome after all. Leng Ning, you are so beautiful. A radiant smile appeared on Fan Li's face when he saw Leng Ning's beautiful eyes. Glancing at her slender figure, he couldn't help but smile back. Many in the crowd turned their gazes over, but upon hearing Fan Li's words, they couldn't help but perspire in shame. This fellow, how could he be so direct when trying to woo a girl? Qin Wendian turned and walked away, leaving aside the fact that he knew this shameless fellow. Idiot. Yan Kong coldly glanced at Fan Lu before turning to Leng Ning. Leng Ning, your eyesight isn't bad at all. Leng Ning didn't expect Fan Li's words to be so mushy, she couldn't help but to be speechless. Everyone, quiet down. At this moment, the old man spoke again, causing the crowd to quieten down. Everyone turned their gazes in his direction, only to see a young lady appearing beside the old man. This young lady was clad in a tight-fitting black robe that perfectly accentuated her exquisite figure. Her fiery hot figure wasn't the least bit inferior to Leng Ning's, and was even more voluptuous. Her neck was as white as a swan, causing the gazes of the onlookers to involuntarily shift downwards. Such a radiant figure, yet she had an incomparably delicate countenance that gave off an intense visual impact. Fan Li's eyes shone with a bright light. He loved the moon continent too much. Beauties were as common as the clouds, and all of them were top-tier beauties. Was Fatty's spring finally here? Bai Lu Yi, the most powerful divine inscriptionist of the younger generation in the White Deer Institute. She's able to inscribe 3rd-rank divine inscriptions, and the inscriptions she inscribed are all extremely exquisite. There are countless suitors chasing after her, don't think too much about it, Leng Ning explained in a low voice. Qin Wendian contemplated Bai Lu Yi. She was indeed an extremely charming woman, able to inscribe 3rd-rank divine inscriptions with a single glance. What's even rarer was the fact that she could inscribe 3rd-rank divine inscriptions at such a young age. Qin Wendian himself was proficient in divine inscriptions, but he knew how difficult it was to inscribe 3rd-rank divine inscriptions. Being able to inscribe 3rd-rank divine inscriptions is indeed not bad. Qin Wendian lightly commented, not knowing that Leng Ning was completely speechless when she looked at him. Being able to inscribe 3rd-rank divine inscriptions was only not bad. Wasn't that already demon level? How could this fellow be so arrogant? Yet he didn't seem to feel the slightest bit ashamed, as though his words were only natural. Chapter 232. Bai Lu Yi surveyed the crowd before her before continuing, later on, all of you choose one of the divine inscriptions inscribed on the stone rampart and pass it to me. If your performance is good, I will take on the role of teacher for this batch of students. The eyes of the crowd brightened when they heard Bai Lu Yi's words. No one dared to think that Bai Lu Yi was inexperienced. As the strongest divine inscriptionist of the younger generation in the White Deer Academy, Bai Lu Yi's attainments in the Tao of divine inscriptions were extremely terrifying. Not only that, she was also a great beauty. The crowd was naturally more than willing to accept her, especially the young males. If he could make use of this opportunity to nurture his relationship with Bai Lu Yi, these fellows are really indulging in fantasy. Leng Ning swept a glance at the gazes of the crowd, including Fan Lu. The White Deer Institute once wanted to find an outstanding young man for Bai Lu Yi, but Bai Lu Yi said that her man's attainments in the Tao of divine inscriptions were higher than hers. Hence, the White Deer Institute immediately gave up on the idea. Is her attainment in divine inscriptions really that high? Qin Wentian asked in astonishment. The students of the White Deer Academy are proficient in all kinds of divine inscriptions, and in addition to the fact that she has a forging-type astral soul, how could her talent in divine inscriptions not be high? Don't tell me you also have designs on her. Leng Ning contemplated Qin Wentian. Noticing Leng Ning's unfriendly gaze, Qin Wentian couldn't help but feel a little depressed. Not only did he have no interest in Bai Lui, but even if he did, there was no need for Leng Ning to look at him in such a manner. I already have someone in my heart. Qin Wentian shook his head and smiled. Only then did Leng Ning feel relieved. The woman in his heart is extremely beautiful, the #1 beauty in the Pill Emperor Hall. Fatty Fan Lu interjected. His expression froze as he stared at Fan Lu. Why don't you say that the person he's in love with is Mo Qingcheng? How did you know? This time around, it was Fan Lu who was stunned. He had only casually mentioned it, but who would have thought that Leng Ning would actually be able to guess it? Seeing how serious Fan Lu was looking at her, Leng Ning held her breath and spat out a single word, scram. These guys were too shameless. Are you acquainted with Mo Qingcheng? Qin Wentian asked in a low voice, his heart pounding. Qingcheng, was she cultivating in that towering great hall? Leng Ning stared at Qin Wentian with a strange expression on her face. After which, she continued, before this, the daughter of the Pill Emperor, Luo He, accepted a disciple. Many major powers personally went over to congratulate her, and this matter shook the entire Moon continent. After which, the name of this female disciple was rumored to be Mo Qingcheng. She has a countenance so beautiful that it could topple empires. Right now, who in the Moon continent doesn't know of her? However, you guys are really shameless enough to say such words. Who? Qin Wentian drew in a deep breath as a bitter smile appeared on his face. Seems like he really had to hurry up and gain control over the hidden faction of the Azure faction. If not, he wouldn't even have the qualifications to see Qingcheng. Even a passerby would feel that the relationship between him and Qingcheng was like a fool's dream. However, the White Deer Institute was a power that had been hidden for thousands of years. Qin Wentian had no understanding of it at all. He could only take things one step at a time, infiltrating the core of the White Deer Institute first. He didn't know what attitude they had towards the Azure Emperor Palace. Okay, come over here and inscribe the divine inscriptions on the stone monument over here. At this moment, the old man beside Bai Lui spoke, leading the crowd forward. Over there were many stone monuments with densely packed divine inscriptions engraved on them. These should have been inscribed by the previous examinees. Fan Lu and Chu Mang stood to the left and right of Qin Wentian, scratching their heads. They didn't understand divine inscriptions at all. Qin Wentian had long since chosen the divine inscription he wanted to inscribe. Astral energy gushed forth from his body as resplendent astral light appeared on his fingertips. Inscribing runic lines of divine inscriptions on the stone monument, he completed them in one breath. Not long after, a flying sword appeared on the stone monument. Done, Miss Bailu, please take a look. At this moment, a voice drifted over. The person who spoke was none other than Yan Kong. He and Qin Wentian had finished inscribing at almost the same time. The gazes of the crowd turned to the stone monument in front of them, only to see an eagle soaring in the skies, flapping its wings as it soared into the skies. An aura gushed forth from the stone monument, causing the crowd to involuntarily sigh in admiration. The standard of this divine inscription could even be compared to the original divine inscriptions on the stone monument. As expected of someone from the Yen clan, their talent in the Tao of divine inscriptions is exceedingly high. Many mused. The Yen clan was extremely famous in this generation. Leng Ning's countenance was extremely unsightly. Not long after, she also inscribed a divine inscription. Although it wasn't bad, there was still a gap between her and Yan Kong. She could only barely inscribe a second-level divine inscription. She couldn't help but feel a tinge of sadness in her heart as she stared at her own divine inscription in a daze. Since you're done, let's return, the old man indifferently stated, as the crowd dispersed. Did you inscribe a second-level divine inscription? Leng Ning absent-mindedly asked as she turned her head to Qin Wentian. She even turned her head back to glance at Qin Wentian. It seemed that Qin Wentian had just inscribed a sword. What a simple divine inscription. Qin Wentian lightly nodded his head. He should be able to get first place. Fan Luo was extremely clear about Qin Wentian's attainments in the Tao of Divine Inscriptions. For someone who could inscribe third-level divine inscriptions, a second-level divine inscription wouldn't be a problem at all. The old man and Bai Lui remained in front of the stone monuments, staring at the divine inscriptions on them. The old man smiled as he observed the divine inscriptions Yan Kong was inscribing. Yan Kong's strength is truly impressive. If he were to study in the White Deer Academy for a period of time, his attainments in the Tao of Divine Inscriptions would be even higher. There are many geniuses in this batch, but Yan Kong is the most impressive. You're wrong. At this moment, Bai Lui stood in front of a stone monument as she interjected. The old man's countenance faltered as he stared at the stone monument. The inscription of a sword was extremely simple, and although it exuded an aura of sharpness, it was, after all, a simple divine inscription. Bai Lui stretched out her hands as astral energy gushed forth, flowing along the divine inscription. Puchi. A terrifyingly sharp aura gushed forth, accompanied by the whistling of a sword intent. A moment later, the stone monument split apart, revealing a sword scar on its surface. Returning to one's natural state. This person's attainments in the Tao of Divine Inscriptions are at the grand completion of the second level. Bai Luyi's eyes flickered as she asked the old man, who was the one who inscribed that. I don't know, I've never seen that young man before. Bai Luyi, are you going to be a teacher for this batch of students? The old man asked. I'll do it. Bai Lui nodded her head. After you pay the Yuan meteor stones, bring them to the academy. Right. The old man nodded his head as he made the necessary arrangements. Within the academy, there were many stone chairs and tables. In front of them, there was a stone wall inscribed with various types of divine inscriptions. Qin Wentian sat beside Leng Ning, while Fan Luo and Chu Mang sat behind them. Bai Lui walked to the stone wall, staring at the crowd as she stated, although there are a few among you who don't know anything about divine inscriptions, but since you're willing to waste your time here, I won't say anything more. Luckily, there's one person whose attainments in the Tao of Divine Inscriptions have reached the pinnacle of the second level. I have high hopes for him. Chu Mang scratched his head as an expression of shame appeared on his face. Beside him, Fan Luo didn't know what shame was. He stared intently at Bai Lui. The more he stared at her, the more beautiful she seemed. The gazes of the crowd shifted onto Yan Kong. He should be the person whom Bai Lui had high hopes for. Feeling the gazes of the crowd, Yan Kong's lips curled up in a faint smile. He stood out like a crane among chickens, exuding a sense of pride. Leng Ning, on the other hand, felt a sense of defeat, as her countenance turned cold. Divine inscriptions are one of the most miraculous energies in the world. Divine inscriptions can be used to forge weapons, inscribe formations, and can even be used in combat. The Tao of Divine Inscriptions contains the Tao of heaven and earth, allowing one to borrow the power of heaven and earth to unleash boundless might, Bai Lui explained to the crowd. Can divine inscriptions be as powerful as one's strength? No matter how high your Tao of Divine Inscriptions is, I'm still stronger than you. Can't I deal with you all the same? Fan Luo asked. Bai Lui glanced at him as she replied, look at the divine inscription you inscribed, you drew a little white puppy, it's not bad. Ha! Momentarily, the crowd erupted into laughter. Luckily, Fan Li's skin was thick, as though nothing had happened. Have you heard of a Yuanfu cultivator killing a heavenly dipper sovereign? Bai Lui asked. That's impossible, right? Of course it's impossible for an ordinary wuxiu. But for powerful divine inscriptionists, they can borrow the power of heaven and earth to achieve such a feat in our moon continent. There's a legendary Grandmaster divine inscriptionist who killed a heavenly dipper sovereign with a cultivation base at the Yuanfu realm. Not only that, this battle was witnessed by many, so feel free to ask around. Bai Lui faintly explained, causing the countenances of the crowd to turn solemn. Evidently, they all knew of this matter. Is he really that powerful? Fan Li's lips twitched. Ling Ning rolled her eyes. This fellow didn't even know how powerful the White Deer Institute was. The Tao of Divine Inscriptions of the White Deer Institute was extremely famous in the entire moon continent. Divine inscriptions for weapons, divine inscriptions for formations, divine inscriptions for combat, they were all proficient in all of these fields. Bai Lui didn't look at Fan Lu as she continued her lecture. Qin Wendian quietly listened. Although he had a high level of talent in the Tao of Divine Inscriptions, his knowledge regarding divine inscriptions was extremely limited. Divine inscriptions were undoubtedly the key for him to enter the White Deer Institute. This lecture lasted for 4 hours, and Qin Wendian felt that he had benefited greatly from it. After which, they departed from the White Deer Institute. How do you feel? Ling Ning asked Qin Wendian. Not bad. Bai Luyi's attainments in the Tao of Divine Inscriptions are not bad, and she was able to give me some inspiration, Qin Wendian laughed. Ling Ning rolled her eyes again. No matter how she listened to Qin Wendian's words, she couldn't help but feel that Qin Wendian's tone was extremely arrogant. Maybe this was just his personality. Actually, Qin Wendian's words were based on his own attainments in the Tao of Divine Inscriptions. However, Ling Ning had always felt that Qin Wendian's attainments in the Tao of Divine Inscriptions were ordinary, and hence, she naturally felt that his words were too arrogant. Miss Leng, we've just arrived here, and we don't have a place to stay. Can we stay at your place for a few days? Fan Lu asked as he walked towards Ling Ning. Qin Wendian was speechless upon hearing Fan Li's words. He then replied, "We'll look for an inn to stay in." Little rascal, come over here. However, little rascal in Ling Ning's embrace actually rubbed his head against Ling Ning's chest, as though he was extremely unwilling to do so. This caused Qin Wendian to be speechless. Little rascal was just as lecherous as Fan Lu. Forget it, my house isn't too far away anyway, and there are plenty of rooms available. You guys can stay here for a few days. Ling Ning was extremely fond of little rascal. Although these people were arrogant, they didn't seem to be bad people. Qin Wendian was also quite polite. Maybe it was because he wanted to save face that he liked to put on an unfathomable front. Chapter 233. Qin Wendian didn't expect Ling Ning to agree. It seemed that although this beauty looked cold, her heart was actually quite pure. If not, she wouldn't have agreed to let strangers stay in her house. After all, this was the first day they met. Hee, beauty Ling Ning, you better take note of your status. It wouldn't be good if my uncle found out about this, a voice drifted over. Yan Kong walked over and mocked Ling Ning. Ling Ning's countenance turned extremely unsightly as she spat out a single word, scram. Humph, Ling Ning, you'd better be more polite to me. Yan Kong coldly laughed as he flicked his sleeves and left. There were a few people following behind him, and one of them laughed, "This lass from the Leng clan is truly beautiful. What a pity. But Yan Kong, you are truly blessed. Even Bai Lui praised you for having a cultivation base at the peak of the second ranked. Maybe, you might have a chance." Yan Kong's countenance brightened as he turned his head to glance at Ling Ning. This lass was very beautiful, but sadly, she wasn't his. However, when he thought of Bai Luyi's alluring figure and pure countenance, his heart couldn't help but palpitate with eagerness. As long as he performed well this month, he could join the White Deer Institute as a guest elder and interact with Bai Lui frequently. Thinking of this, Yan Kong left with an arrogant expression on his face. "Let's go." Ling Ning spoke in a low voice. It was unknown if it was because of Yan Kong's words, but her countenance was as cold as ice, as though she had something on her mind. She even ignored Fan Li's attempts to disturb her, causing Qin Wendian to guess that Leng Ning must have met with some trouble. The Leng clan could be considered a major clan in this region, much larger compared to the Mo clan in Chu. Any clan in the Moon continent would be incomparable to the Chu country. After walking for a while, two silhouettes appeared in front of them. It was a young man and a young woman. Over here. Leng Ning intentionally avoided them, but the young woman had already called out with a smile, "Leng Ning, why are you leaving the moment you see me?" "Leng Lin, what's the matter?" Leng Ning asked with a frown. "I heard you went to the White Deer Institute to study divine inscriptions. Why do you have to work so hard? When the time comes, you can just marry him. At that time, your status will also rise." Leng Lin's tone seemed a little strange. "Let's go." Leng Ning didn't want to bother with Leng Lin, as she whispered to Qin Wendian and the rest behind her. "Hee, you actually brought a few men back. You have to be careful of your image. Could it be that you want to learn from me and find someone reliable?" As Leng Lin spoke, she leaned on the body of the young man beside her. The young man watched on calmly with a smile on his face, contemplating Leng Ning and the others. Leng Ning didn't intend to waste any more time, and continued walking forwards. Qin Wendian walked to the side of Leng Ning, and upon seeing the baleful look on her face, he couldn't help but ask in a low voice, "The clan arranged a marriage for you, are you not willing?" "Qin out, Qin clan," Leng Ning didn't even bother to ask. Glances, Leng Ning's words. Here. Ningri. It seemed like this matter was Leng Ning's Achilles heel. As the young miss of the Leng clan, Leng Ning had her own private courtyard. There were many rooms in this courtyard. She pointed to a room and said to Qin Wendian, "You stay in this room, he'll stay in that room, and that fatty will stay in the room furthest to the side." "Why am I staying in the room furthest to the side?" Fan Lu asked with a bitter expression. "I'm worried about you." Leng Ning coldly replied, causing Fan Li's countenance to crumble. "Nonsense, what nonsense?" At this moment, an enraged voice drifted over, followed by the sound of footsteps. A middle-aged man walked over, sweeping a glance at Qin Wendian and the rest as he coldly asked, "Who are they?" "A friend I met in the White Deer Institute." Leng Ning's countenance was as cold as ever. "They studied divine inscriptions together with you? What a joke. Do you think you can solve this problem by finding a few random men? Are you trying to anger the Yen clan?" The middle-aged man angrily berated, "Let them leave. You don't need to interfere in my matters." Leng Ning bluntly stated. "I'm your father." The middle-aged man raged. Hee, so you still remember that you're my father?" Leng Ning's eyes flickered with coldness. How infuriating. Why are you so immature? I'm doing this for your own good. That's a third-ranked grandmaster we're talking about. The middle-aged man pointed at Leng Ning. Scram! Leng Ning roared. You! The silhouette of the middle-aged man flickered as he lifted his palm, preparing to strike out. However, Leng Ning merely stared coldly at him. You're on your own now. The middle-aged man didn't continue his attack, he flicked his sleeves and left. Qin Wendian and the rest were all dumbfounded. Things seemed to be a little complicated, but as outsiders, it wasn't their place to comment on it. After Leng Ning returned to her room, Qin Wendian and the rest also returned to their own rooms to rest. In his room, Qin Wendian sat cross-legged as he examined his yuanfu. His 3 yuanfu were akin to pools of water, filled with astral energy, and there were even traces of divine energy within. The reason why Qin Wendian's mastery of divine inscriptions was so high was because he was constantly using divine inscriptions to condense divine energy. Currently, to Qin Wendian, he only needed a short amount of time to condense a second-ranked divine inscription. Cultivating in the yuanfu realm is truly difficult. Especially for me, I still need to condense 3 yuanfu. Qin Wendian was extremely depressed. Previously, his cultivation speed was extremely fast, but now that he stepped into yuanfu, he was only at the 2nd level of yuanfu. However, the amount of astral energy contained in his Yuanfu was much greater compared to others. The door opened, and little rascal popped its head in. After which, Qin Wendian heard a squeaking sound in his mind, as though little rascal wanted to say something to him. After which, Qin Wendian saw little rascal turning around, as though it was hinting for him to leave. Qin Wendian felt that something was amiss, but he still followed little rascal out. Little rascal turned back to look at him, before running towards Leng Ning's room. "You want me to go in?" Qin Wendian asked in a low voice, as little rascal nodded its head. Qin Wendian smiled bitterly. He didn't know what little rascal was trying to say, but he still went to Leng Ning's room. The door wasn't closed, and he could see Leng Ning sitting there, crying her eyes out. This caused Qin Wendian to be stunned. This cold beauty was actually secretly wiping away her tears. Upon seeing Qin Wendian walking over, Leng Ning hurriedly turned her head away as she coldly asked, "What are you doing in here?" Qin Wendian smiled bitterly as he walked towards Leng Ning. He sat down at the tea table opposite of Leng Ning as he asked in a low voice, "Is there something that you can't get over? Why must you do this?" Leng Ning stared at Qin Wendian, and upon seeing his clear eyes, she couldn't help but to think that this fellow was indeed handsome, just a little too exaggerated. "That person earlier was my father. He and his clan arranged a marriage for me, to marry Yan Kong's uncle, the Yan Kong I met back in the White Deer Institute. His uncle is a man in his 70s or 80s, but that's still fine. Most people in their 70s or 80s would still look like middle-aged men due to their cultivation, but his uncle has an extremely ugly appearance. What's even more ridiculous is that he has already married a few wives, and all of them have gone mad. Yes, mad, they were abused to the point of insanity. Yan Kong's uncle is a sadist, a madman, and my father wanted me to marry him." Leng Ning started crying again, her eyes red. "What's even more ridiculous is that they even said that it was for my own good. Isn't it because that old ghost is a third-rank divine inscriptionist, and can help them? Hence, they wanted to sacrifice me, pushing me into the hands of the devil." Qin Wendian was stunned speechless when he heard Leng Ning's words. Could the great clans really be so cruel? For the sake of their own selfish desires, they would even sacrifice their own women? This was too much. Qingqing was born in the Mo clan, but Mo Tianlin doted on her a lot. His father, Qin Chuan, also had deep feelings for her. "Is there no other way?" Qin Wendian asked in a low voice. "There is, we need to find someone with outstanding talent. That Leng Lin from before, she's my cousin." Initially, the clan chose her, but she found a man, the one you saw earlier, a peak-tier second-rank divine inscriptionist with a cultivation base at the 3rd level of Yuanfu. Leng Lin then said that she wanted me to marry him, hence, the clan chose me. Hee hee, how laughable. At this moment, Leng Ning was extremely weak. She lay on the chair, staring at Qin Wendian as a thought flashed through her mind. Wasn't this fellow also a divine inscriptionist? But in the next moment, her countenance darkened. How could she have such a thought? Although this fellow was handsome, he was actually an arrogant and boastful fellow. Second-rank divine inscriptionist. Seems like the requirements of your clan aren't too high. Qin Wendian laughed. Leng Ning was speechless when she heard Qin Wendian's words. Could it be that you are a peak-tier second-rank divine inscriptionist and are prepared to marry me? If that's the case, I'm really willing to marry you. Qin Wendian's face was filled with black lines. This was really troublesome. It was impossible for him to marry Leng Ning. Forget it. How could I say such an idiotic thing? You. Leng Ning shook her head as she stared at Qin Wendian. But you are also quite adorable. The divine inscriptions you inscribe during the examination are the simplest, yet your tone is so arrogant. I really don't know what you are thinking. After speaking, Leng Ning started laughing. Qin Wendian couldn't help but sigh in his heart when he saw how beautiful Leng Ning was when she laughed. Actually, you look even better when you laugh. Why must you be so cold? Just let nature take its course. Maybe when the time comes, there will be a solution. Qin Wentian persuaded. Fine, I'll laugh. Leng Ning's mood lightened up after she spoke. She glared at Qin Wentian with hidden bitterness, exuding an aura of femininity. Actually, I'm a third-rank divine inscriptionist. Qin Wentian spoke to Leng Ning. He didn't know if he could help her or not. Leng Ning froze for a moment before giggling. I know, the person in your heart is Mo Qingcheng from the Pill Emperor Hall. The two of you are in love with each other. This time around, you came to the moon continent to look for Mo Qingcheng, right? Qin Wentian seriously nodded his head. Leng Ning was completely speechless. Good, good. Thank you for listening to me. You should leave now, this is my room. Qin Wentian smiled bitterly. Was he so untrustworthy? In any case, he still had to stay here for a period of time. He might as well see if he could help this pitiful lass. As for marrying her, Qin Wentian had no such thoughts. After Qin Wentian left, Leng Ning shook her head and whispered, what a braggart. If you were a third-rank divine inscriptionist, I would even be willing to be your concubine. Qin Wentian's perception was extremely sharp. Upon hearing Leng Ning's words, he almost fell to the ground. His face was filled with black lines. Could he still reveal his talent as a third-rank divine inscriptionist in the future? Chapter 234. The night was as tranquil as still water. Qin Wentian was quietly cultivating in his room. Strands of astral light cascaded down from the heavens, illuminating the roof of Qin Wentian's room. Leng Ning sat on a rattan chair in the middle of the courtyard. The two ends of the chair were dangling from a tree on both sides, gently swaying in the wind. When she was young, her mother would often tease her like this. Sadly, her mother had passed away, and her father had no status in the clan. Thinking of this, Leng Ning lightly sighed, as a bitter smile appeared on her face. Lifting her head, she gazed in the direction of Qin Wentian's room. From such a close distance, she could feel that the astral light in his room was much denser. What a braggart! How interesting! Leng Ning couldn't help but laugh at the thought of Qin Wentian's shamelessness. This person's skin was so thick that she was speechless. She had said that they were in love, yet he still had the cheek to nod his head. When the sun rose, Qin Wentian walked out of his room. Upon seeing Leng Ning sleeping on the rattan chair, he couldn't help but walk up and drape his cloak over her. Leng Ning's eyelashes fluttered as she opened her eyes. Upon seeing Qin Wentian, she involuntarily smiled. Good morning, Grand Master Divine Inscriptionist. Qin Wentian perspired. Morning. The sun is about to rise, I'll go prepare some food. I'm not used to not eating in the morning. Leng Ning stood up from the rattan chair and went to prepare some snacks. Although it was fine for cultivators at the Yuanfu realm to not eat or drink, humans still loved to use food as a supplement to their lives, to satisfy their cravings. Not bad. Qin Wentian smiled as he tasted the snacks. Thank you, Grandmaster, for your praise. Shouldn't we wake those two fellows up and head to the White Deer Institute? Leng Ning mischievously asked. The two of them aren't interested in divine inscriptions, it doesn't matter if they don't go or not. Let's go first. Qin Wentian spoke in a low voice. If Fan Lu and Chu Mang were willing to cultivate here, it wouldn't be a waste of time. That's fine too. Leng Ning nodded her head and the two of them headed towards the White Deer Institute. However, before he could enter the academy, Qin Wentian was blocked by someone. Today, Yan Kong was clad in a blue robe, and there were a few people following behind him, blocking the path of Qin Wentian and Leng Ning. Their countenances were filled with hostility. I heard that you stayed in her courtyard yesterday. Yan Kong stared at Qin Wentian. His narrowed eyes seemed to gleam with the sharpness of a blade, causing people to feel extremely uncomfortable. Yan Kong, I don't need you to interfere in my matters. Leng Ning furrowed her brows as she berated. You will marry into my Yan family sooner or later. You better be careful. Yan Kong coldly stared at Leng Ning before turning to Qin Wentian. It's fine if you like women, but there are some women you can't touch. If not, you won't even know how you died. Let me give you a piece of advice, get the hell out of the Leng clan as soon as possible. After speaking, Yan Kong turned and stepped into the White Deer Institute. The people beside him laughed as they watched Qin Wentian and Leng Ning, with hints of mockery in their eyes. After which, they followed after Yan Kong. I'm sorry, I've implicated you. Leng Ning apologized. I was the one who took the initiative to stay at your residence. What are you apologizing for? Qin Wentian casually shrugged his shoulders. Fan Le had told him before that Yan Kong's cultivation base was at the 3rd level of Yuanfu, and was a peak-tier 2nd-ranked divine inscriptionist. He wouldn't pose any threat to Qin Wentian. Only the Yan clan might be a little troublesome, but if Yan Kong really wanted to deal with him, Qin Wentian wouldn't mind teaching him a lesson. Why don't you move out today? Leng Ning shook her head as she stared at Qin Wentian. It's fine, there's no need to bother with him. Qin Wentian didn't mind as he stepped into the White Deer Institute. Leng Ning shook her head as she stared at Qin Wentian's back view. This fellow was too stubborn. When Yan Kong was talking to him, why didn't he have any reaction at all? And now, he was acting so stubbornly in front of her. Qin Wentian's studies in the White Deer Institute were very peaceful. The knowledge Bai Lu Yi had imparted to him had indeed opened a new door for him in the Tao of Divine Inscriptions. In the past, he only knew that divine inscriptions could be used to forge weapons and cast divine energy. But now, he understood that the Tao of Divine Inscriptions was extremely broad and profound. According to the teachings of the White Deer Institute, the Tao of Divine Inscriptions could be divided into 4 categories: Divine Inscriptions Forging, Divine Inscriptions Inscribing, Divine Inscriptions Combat, and Divine Inscriptions Puppet Refinement. Forging weapons with divine inscriptions, as the name implied, was to forge divine weapons. Inscribing formations with divine inscriptions was to inscribe formations. As for combat with divine inscriptions, it was something that Qin Wentian had comprehended in the past. It was just that his comprehension of divine inscriptions was very shallow. As for puppet refinement with divine inscriptions, it was to use the power of divine inscriptions to forge puppets. Bai Lu Yi didn't explain the Tao of puppets in detail, but Qin Wentian couldn't help but feel a faint sense of excitement in his heart. He had once cultivated the Tao of Divine Inscriptions, using divine inscriptions to condense innate techniques that could be unleashed through the arterial pathways of the body. Similarly, using divine inscriptions to inscribe divine energy could also be unleashed through the arterial pathways of the body. Hence, he had always had a bold idea. Could it be that the structure of the human body, as well as the meridians of the human body, were themselves a type of unique divine inscriptions? He could imagine that the human body was made up of countless divine runes. If that was the case, the Tao of puppets would be completely understandable. Other than lecturing on the basics of divine inscriptions, Bai Lu Yi would also personally teach the students how to research, inscribe, and destroy divine inscriptions. Unknowingly, a month's time was almost up. To someone like Fan Le, this was indeed a waste of time and yuan meteor stones. But to Qin Wentian, this investment was truly worth it. In front of the stone rampart of the academy, Bai Lu Yi no longer continued her lecture. She glanced at the students before her. Her countenance was still as calm as ever, giving off a feeling of cold. Yet that pure and innocent countenance of hers was extremely endearing. Okay, tomorrow will be the last day for you all to learn from me. Tomorrow, I will not be teaching you all in the academy. Instead, I'm preparing to head to the Hell Arena in the Eastern City to personally spectate the battles between divine inscriptions, Bai Lu Yi stated, causing the pupils of many to narrow. Hell Arena. What kind of place is the Hell Arena? Qin Wentian asked in a low voice to Leng Ning, who was beside him. Leng Ning's countenance turned solemn. When she thought of that terrifying place, she felt her scalp going numb. This cold beauty Bai Lu Yi was truly audacious. She actually wanted to head to the Hell Arena. The craziest place in the Moon continent is both heaven and hell. It can also be called the largest gambling den. The people there gamble with their lives, Leng Ning stated in a low voice. Leng Ning spoke in a low voice, her words causing Qin Wentian to cast a few glances at Bai Lu Yi. This cold beauty was truly charismatic, as expected of a genius from the White Deer Institute. Also, after tomorrow, I intend to choose one of you to continue studying the Tao of Divine Inscriptions with me, Bai Lu Yi stated in a low voice. Momentarily, expressions of excitement appeared on the faces of many. Who would be so lucky to be able to study the Tao of Divine Inscriptions with Bai Lu Yi? The gazes of many involuntarily turned to Yan Kong. If Bai Lu Yi had to choose one person, she would definitely choose the one with the strongest inscriptions. In that case, Yan Kong would undoubtedly be chosen. However, Qin Wentian didn't think so. He saw Bai Lu Yi glancing at him, and although it was just a glance, Qin Wentian's heart was as clear as a mirror. It was impossible for Bai Lu Yi to not understand the divine inscriptions he had inscribed that day. Not only that, during the past month of study, he had also used various methods to hint at his divine inscriptions ability in front of Bai Lu Yi. This way, it wouldn't be too abrupt, and would also allow Bai Lu Yi to remember him. And now, the opportunity had finally arrived. Leng Ning, I would like to invite Bai Lu Yi for a meal later. You guys can return first, Qin Wentian whispered to Leng Ning, causing her to freeze. She glared at Qin Wentian. Bai Lu Yi rarely interacts with men. A few days ago, Yan Kong also invited her, but she rejected him. This fellow was still as arrogant as ever. He hadn't changed at all. I know. Qin Wentian nodded his head, as though he didn't care at all. Leng Ning was speechless, but she didn't say anything more. Let him hit the wall himself. Yan Kong, who was in front, turned his head and glanced at Qin Wentian. This fellow really didn't listen to advice, he still hadn't moved out of the Leng clan. And now, he even wanted to invite Bai Lu Yi for a meal. What a joke. Alright, let's call it a day. Everyone, disperse, Bai Lu Yi stated. Teacher Bai Lu, Qin Wentian called out, seeing that Bai Lu Yi was about to depart. Bai Lu Yi halted her steps upon seeing Qin Wentian. She had a deep impression of Qin Wentian since the first time he took the divine inscription examination. In the following month, he was extremely serious, and would ask questions whenever he didn't understand something. Some of his questions sounded like idiocy, but he didn't mind, even if he would be laughed at by others. Bai Lu Yi felt that it was strange why Qin Wentian would ask such basic questions. This fellow would occasionally give her hints, but she could sense that Qin Wentian's attainments in the Tao of Divine Inscriptions weren't as simple as a second-ranked divine inscriptionist. This was also the reason why she wanted to recruit someone to continue learning under her. Is there anything I can help you with? Bai Lu Yi asked, looking at Qin Wentian. I would like to invite Teacher Bai Lu for a meal to discuss some questions regarding the Tao of Divine Inscriptions. I wonder if Teacher Bai Lu is free. Qin Wentian smiled as he walked towards Bai Lu Yi. The entire academy was filled with boos. Qin Wentian's words instantly caused a commotion. Was this fellow crazy? Was he dreaming? He actually wanted to invite their goddess to a meal. What a fool. They were already waiting to see Qin Wentian make a fool of himself. Back then, even Yan Kong was mercilessly rejected by Qin Wentian. Yan Kong stared at Qin Wentian, feeling a little ridiculous. Shifting his gaze to Leng Ning, he laughed in a low voice. This friend of yours, is there a problem here? As Yan Kong spoke, he pointed to his head, causing the people around him to burst out laughing. Leng Ning's countenance was unsightly, but since Qin Wentian wanted to do this, there was nothing she could do. Fine. At this moment, a crisp sound rang out, causing the smile on Yan Kong's face to freeze. His finger was still pointing to his head, yet he couldn't move it no matter how hard he tried. Chapter 235. Along with this crisp sound, the entire academy fell silent in an instant. The owner of the voice was undoubtedly Bai Lu Yi. Not only did she not reject, she even accepted Qin Wentian's invitation without hesitation. Yan Kong's finger was still pointing at his head, while Ling Ning had an extremely interesting expression on her face, as though she had been possessed. But after a moment of shock, she smiled at Yan Kong. Just because you can't do it, doesn't mean others can't. Yan Kong, don't overestimate yourself too much, you're just a joke. Evidently, Ling Ning was referring to the matter of Yan Kong's invitation to Bai Lu Yi being rejected. At that time, Yan Kong didn't feel that it was too shameful, as everyone felt that it was only natural. After all, how could it be so easy to invite the cold and lofty Bai Lu Yi? But now that Qin Wentian had succeeded, it undoubtedly caused Yan Kong to be embarrassed. Shifting his gaze over, Yan Kong stared at Bai Lu Yi and Qin Wentian as his countenance flickered with uncertainty. Maybe because today was the last day Bai Lu Yi would be teaching them, Bai Lu Yi decided to give him some face. If he asked for it today, he would definitely do it. After all, he was the strongest inscriptionist here. Thinking of this, Yan Kong flashed a smile that he thought was handsome as he spoke. Teacher Bai Lu, I also have some questions regarding divine inscriptions that I wish to consult you on. Bai Lu Yi was just about to leave with Qin Wentian when she heard Yan Kong's words. She couldn't help but to feel that it was ridiculous. What did this person treat her as? Was he trying to show off? I've already promised him, Bai Lu Yi politely rejected, not wanting to make things too difficult for Yan Kong. Then I can invite you for dinner. Yan Kong smiled warmly, causing many to turn their gazes over. Bai Lu Yi furrowed her brows. This person really didn't know when to stop. I'm not free. Bai Lu Yi coldly replied, before walking out of the academy, leaving behind a dumbfounded Yan Kong. His countenance alternated between shades of green and white as he noticed the gazes of the crowd on him. This is called asking for a beating. Ling Ning giggled. Looking at the sullen expression on Yan Kong's face, she couldn't help but feel delighted. She discovered that Qin Wentian was actually quite adorable. Yan Kong stared at the back of Qin Wentian, his lips as sharp as a blade, flickering with killing intent. Since he didn't dare to do anything to Bai Lu Yi, he could only vent his anger on Qin Wentian. Qin Wentian couldn't be bothered with Yan Kong's thoughts. Together with Bai Lu Yi, they exited the White Deer Institute. Bai Lu Yi's beautiful eyes stared at him as she asked, "Where are we going?" "I don't know the place." "Why don't you take me there?" Qin Wentian awkwardly replied. Bai Lu Yi's beautiful eyes flickered as she stared at him. "Is this how you treat us?" I entered the White Deer Institute on the first day I arrived in the Moon Continent. Since then, I've been staying with the Leng clan. Qin Wentian said, a little embarrassed. "All right then, come with me," Bai Lu Yi straightforwardly replied. Qin Wentian smiled as he followed after her. However, not long after, Qin Wentian began to cry. Bai Lu Yi brought him to an inn named Immortal Aroma Lodge. The environment of this inn was extremely elegant, especially so for the location Bai Lu Yi had chosen. Behind a folding screen, the two of them could be seen leaning against the railing, gazing down at the lake below. A gentle breeze blew past, and there were only the two of them in the room. The wine and dishes on the table were rich and mellow, while the aroma of meat assailed the nostrils. The dishes were actually cooked using special ingredients mixed with the meat of precious demonic beasts. The price of this table was equivalent to the price Qin Wentian had to pay for a month's worth of divine inscriptions. Bai Lu Yi couldn't help but smile when she saw Qin Wentian staring at her unblinkingly. Her smile was akin to the blooming of a snow lotus on an iceberg, exuding a wondrous feeling. The Immortal Aroma Lodge is the most famous inn in the Moon Continent, and we have many branches. The dishes here are all specially made and are extremely beneficial to Wu Xiu's health. It's just that the price is a little too high. Why? You asked me to bring you here, are you unwilling to part with the price? Bai Lu Yi's countenance was pure and innocent, and her smile was extremely beautiful. However, when Bai Lu Yi saw that Qin Wentian was still staring at her, she couldn't help but feel uneasy. This fellow, didn't he just tease her a little? Why must he be so petty? That smile of yours is worth it. Qin Wendian laughed, causing Bai Lu Yi to freeze. She glared at Qin Wendian before reverting back to her usual cold self. She didn't expect that she would be teased by him instead. Let's call it even. Qin Wendian couldn't help but feel a sense of joy in his heart. Bai Lu Yi must have been hiding her true side in front of them. Bringing him here was just a prank. You've got guts. Bai Lu Yi knew that Qin Wendian was doing this on purpose. Speak, what's your level of attainment in the Tao of Divine Inscriptions? Before I joined the White Deer Institute, I've always been a third-rank divine inscriptionist. Qin Wendian didn't hide anything from Bai Lu Yi. Without sufficient strength, how would he be able to control the White Deer Institute? Then why did you purposely come here to learn? Bai Lu Yi glared at Qin Wendian. But my understanding of divine inscriptions is extremely limited. For example, the forging of weapons, inscribing formations, combat techniques, as well as the creation of puppets, I'm completely clueless about them. Before this, I could only inscribe third-rank divine inscriptions to aid in the forging of third-rank divine weapons, Qin Wendian explained. Do you have any samples of the divine inscriptions you inscribed? Bai Lu Yi asked. Qin Wendian nodded his head as he caressed the interspatial ring on his finger. A moment later, a painting appeared in Qin Wendian's hands as he passed it over to Bai Lu Yi. An innate technique hidden within the divine inscriptions. Bai Lu Yi could discern the profundity of the painting with a single glance. She stared at Qin Wendian in astonishment. This fellow's level of attainment in the Tao of Divine Inscriptions was actually so high. Have you really never studied it before? You're just trying to figure it out yourself. Bai Lu Yi was extremely curious about Qin Wendian. I have a forging-type astral soul, and was born with the aptitude for inscribing divine inscriptions. If Qin Wendian were to tell Leng Ning these words, she would definitely say that he was boasting. However, Bai Lu Yi didn't doubt his words. Her beautiful eyes couldn't help but shine with a brilliant light as she stared at Qin Wendian. Evidently, she had dropped her facade. Seems like you're a genius in the Tao of Divine Inscriptions. In that case, do you have any questions for me? Bai Lu Yi asked. Didn't you say you wanted me to continue studying the Tao of Divine Inscriptions with you? Qin Wendian laughed as he looked at Bai Lu Yi, causing her to stare at him. You sure are narcissistic. If it's not me, could it be Yan Kong? Qin Wendian shrugged as he continued, actually, even if you didn't do this, I would still think of a way to continue studying the Tao of Divine Inscriptions with you. After all, there are many things that I don't understand. Although I've benefited greatly from this 1 month, I still feel that I'm still lacking. Hence, the reason why I'm treating you to a meal is because I want to get closer to you. Bai Lu Yi stared at Qin Wendian in astonishment. She only saw that Qin Wendian's eyes were clear and pure, and he had a simple smile on his face. It was very sincere, completely different from the gazes of many men when they looked at her. Not only that, he didn't hide his intentions at all, causing her to feel a sense of intrigue. You won't have improper thoughts about me, right? Bai Lu Yi suddenly asked. Cough, cough. Qin Wendian coughed, almost choking on his wine. That simple and innocent face of hers was indeed extremely lethal. Qin Wendian didn't expect Bai Lu Yi to be so direct. He bitterly smiled, Miss Bai Lu Yi, I already have a woman that I love. Is that so? Bai Lu Yi was still skeptical. Is she beautiful? Yes, she's very beautiful. Qin Wendian nodded his head. How is she compared to me? Bai Lu Yi smiled as she looked at Qin Wendian, causing Qin Wendian to see her in a new light. She should be more beautiful than you. Qin Wendian seriously nodded his head, causing Bai Lu Yi's beautiful eyes to freeze for a moment before she smiled. In that case, I'd like to meet her in the future. Does that mean you believe me? Qin Wendian also relaxed. For the time being, I'll believe you. However, if I discover that you're lying to me, you better be careful. Bai Lu Yi flashed a threatening expression, causing Qin Wendian to shiver involuntarily. According to Leng Ning, this Bai Lu Yi was extremely powerful, and was even proficient in the Tao of puppets. Every time someone dared to disrespect her, they would be taught a terrible lesson. After that, the two of them chatted about some topics related to divine inscriptions. Qin Wendian was extremely satisfied with this meeting. In the future, he would be able to study divine inscriptions together with Bai Lu Yi, which meant that he would have one foot in the White Deer Institute. His first step in taking over the White Deer Institute. After returning to the Leng clan, Leng Ning kept staring at Qin Wendian, her beautiful eyes flickering. "What are you looking at?" Qin Wendian perspired. "What did you talk about with Bai Lu Yi?" Leng Ning asked curiously. "Nothing much, I just wanted to get closer to her. After all, I'll be studying divine inscriptions together with her in the future." Qin Wendian replied, his words causing Leng Ning's lips to twitch. "You're saying that Bai Lu Yi will choose you to be with her?" "Qin Wendian nodded. Leng Ning stretched out her hand, gently placing it on Qin Wendian's forehead. Over the past month, the two of them had grown closer, and treated each other as friends. Hence, Leng Ning was much more casual with her actions. "What are you doing?" Qin Wendian's face was filled with black lines when he saw Leng Ning placing her hand on his forehead. "I'm checking to see if your brain is damaged." Leng Ning retracted her hand, speechless. "But your luck is really good, to think that Bai Lu Yi would agree to eat with you. How strange." After which, Leng Ning shook her head and returned to her room. No matter how much she thought about it, she couldn't understand what was going on. However, the events of the second day caused Leng Ning to be taken aback. After Leng Ning and the rest gathered at the academy, they proceeded towards the Hell Arena. Bai Lu Yi walked in front alone, and no one dared to approach her. Qin Wendian was the only one who was more daring, walking shoulder to shoulder with Bai Lu Yi. The two of them chatted happily, as though they were very relaxed. Upon seeing this, Leng Ning was dumbfounded. Could it be that Bai Lu Yi, this pure and innocent teacher, had been duped by the boastful Qin Wendian? Yan Kong narrowed his eyes, his gaze akin to that of a venomous snake, as he stared fixedly at Qin Wendian's back. Only Fatty Fan Li's worship of Qin Wendian had reached a point where he could prostrate himself before him. Not only did he easily get closer to Leng Ning, he was even so close to the ice beauty Bai Lu Yi. How could he not be inferior to Qin Wendian? As he thought of this, Fatty Fan Lu even narcissistically touched his own face. At this moment, many in the crowd were thinking that Bai Lu Yi was only 18 this year, in the prime of her youth. Could it be that she had fallen in love with Qin Wendian? If that was the case, didn't that mean that the slot to cultivate together with her was? As they thought of this, many people cast sympathetic glances at Yan Kong. Yan Kong also had the same conjecture. His gaze grew colder and colder as he stared at Qin Wendian. Since this was the case, he could only say that Qin Wendian was courting death. Chapter 236. The Hell Arena was located in the eastern region of the Moon continent, facing the Jade Cloud Lake, resembling an island suspended in the middle of the lake. The number of people entering and exiting the Hell Arena was extremely high. Up ahead, there was an empty space that seemed to be a spectator's stand. In front of Qin Wendian and the rest, a flight of stairs appeared. So many people. Qin Wendian was taken aback. The Hell Arena is one of the most famous places in the Moon continent. "Let's go up," Bai Lu Yi stated. Qin Wendian inclined his head and stared ahead. The towering stone pillars towered over the surface of the lake, propping up the three towering platforms, giving off an intense visual impact to the spectators. You're right, Bai Lu Yi replied. "This is the Hell Arena. The one in the middle is reserved for Heavenly Dipper sovereigns to battle against each other. The one on the left is for Yuanfu sovereigns, while the one on the right is for non-standard battles. For example, divine inscriptions and puppets battles," Bai Lu Yi explained. "Heavenly Dipper sovereigns actually came here to gamble?" Qin Wendian exclaimed in bewilderment. On the way here, Bai Lu Yi had already given him a brief introduction of the Hell Arena. It was the most brutal arena in the Moon continent, as well as the most luxurious gambling platform. Once you stepped onto the Hell arena, your life or death would be determined by fate. There was no way to concede, and as long as you were still on the arena, your life or death would be determined by your strength. Heavenly Dipper sovereigns only need to participate in the battles, and if they win, the rewards will be increased. You have to know that Heavenly Dipper sovereigns require a huge amount of resources to cultivate, and not all Heavenly Dipper sovereigns have the support of their clans. Many have to depend on themselves, and the Hell Arena provides them with a way to quickly accumulate resources, as well as to temper themselves in combat. Bai Lu-yi explained in a low voice. When they entered, they had already paid the entrance fee of Yuan meteor stones. With so many spectators, even if they didn't participate in the battles, it would still be a hefty sum of money. Qin Wentian nodded lightly. The people in the Hell Arena all wore masks, and each had a unique title. This was to prevent anyone from seeking revenge. Once you went up, no one would know who you were other than the controller of the Hell Arena. Therefore, even if you died in battle, your clan members wouldn't know who killed you. How could you seek revenge? In this way, the participants could do whatever they wanted without any fear. This was the highlight of the Hell Arena. As for finding trouble with the Hell Arena, in the entire Moon continent, there weren't many powers that dared to do so. At this moment, deafening cheers rang out from the spectator stands. Qin Wentian turned his gaze over, only to see a masked man insta-killing his opponent. His cultivation base was at the peak of Yuanfu, and his opponent was also at the same level as him. Azura, 138 consecutive victories, he continues to set a new record. The judge on the other side of the Hell Arena announced Azura's victory. The sound of the cheers was so loud that it seemed as though the entire Hell Arena would collapse. At this moment, the spectators gave Qin Wentian a feeling of fanaticism. This masked man, Azura, was able to achieve 138 consecutive victories. One could very well imagine how powerful he was. That guy was unlucky to have encountered Azura. After this, no one else dared to challenge him. Someone commented. Indeed, no one dared to challenge Azura. That person could only blame his bad luck for not going down the arena after winning a single battle. He was too arrogant, and in the end, he met Azura. No one dared to challenge him. Azura walked down the pathway, and no one knew of his identity. Azura took off his mask as he walked down the pathway. His countenance was expressionless. It seemed like the Hell Arena no longer had any effect on him. In the future, he wouldn't come here again. As for wealth, it was nothing more than floating clouds to him. If Qin Wentian saw Azura's appearance, he would definitely recognize him. The top ranker of the Heavenly Fate rankings of Grand Xia, Hua Taishu. Azura, who could he be? Bai Lu-yi murmured. Evidently, she was also filled with curiosity towards this mysterious and powerful Azura. This man was the legend of the Hell Arena, with 138 consecutive victories. Not only that, he had never feared anyone challenging him after his victory. But within the Yuanfu realm, there was no one who could defeat him. He was a true legend. There's someone on the right platform, it's Hades, and a newcomer. This Hades is a third-ranked puppet master, and his strength is extremely terrifying. The reason I brought you all here is because I want you all to witness a battle between divine inscriptionists. Bai Lu-yi turned her head and spoke to the crowd. They all came to the right platform, and after finding an empty space, Bai Lu-yi sat together with Qin Wentian, causing the spectators to suspect that there was something fishy going on between the two of them. There's going to be a good show, there's actually someone who dares to challenge Hades. Expressions of interest appeared on the faces of the spectators, and there were even some who ran to the betting booth to place their bets. Although the payout rate for Hades was extremely low, they were still willing to bet on him. Hee hee. Hades laughed sinisterly. After that, a figure appeared in front of him, floating in the air. A human. Qin Wentian's gaze froze. It couldn't be a human, it must have appeared from his interspatial ring. A humanoid puppet. The cultivation methods of this Hades are somewhat evil. He likes to use humans as puppets, Bai-Lu-Yi stated in a low voice. In front of Hades's opponent, a metallic puppet appeared. Naturally, it was in the form of a human, but it was much larger in size. Hades's opponent's body directly entered the body of the puppet, allowing him to control it as he pleased. Hades. Die. Hades coldly spat out. The humanoid puppet moved like the wind, transforming into a blur as it dashed towards the metallic puppet. Lifting its palms, a terrifying revolving sword slashed out, slashing towards its opponent. However, the metallic puppet lifted its palms, and although its movements were clumsy, it seemed to be filled with strength. The attacks of the two clashed against each other in an instant. Kacha sounds rang out as the sword slashed on the puppet, causing sparks to fly. Metal puppets were also known as divine weapon puppets, and the cost of creating them was extremely high. Their attacks and defenses were naturally tyrannical, just like killing machines. However, their agility was much lower. Courting death. Hades coldly spat. After which, he stepped out unceasingly, causing runic inscriptions to interweave on the ground, incomparably resplendent. His silhouette flickered as he circled around the metallic puppet, frenziedly inscribing divine inscriptions. At the same time, his astral energy gushed forth, causing the divine inscriptions to erupt forth with terrifying might as he attacked his opponent. The metallic puppet wanted to break free from the entanglement of Hades's puppet, and directly lunged towards Hades. However, Hades merely waved his palms as the divine inscriptions beneath his feet glowed even brighter. Numerous demonic dragons roared as a rain of swords rained down on his opponent. So this is a combat-type divine inscription. Qin Wentian only felt that Hades could do as he pleased, controlling the energy of heaven and earth to fight for him. Roar. A terrifying roar rang out as Yama advanced step by step. It was as though there was a primordial dragon following him. With every step he took, his aura grew stronger. The controller of the divine weapon puppet howled in rage. Terrifying fist shadows transformed into a screen of light that blasted outwards. However, Hades merely waved his palms as a gigantic dragon manifested, slamming into the puppet. At the same time, the human-shaped puppet descended from the sky, abruptly sitting on the neck of the divine weapon puppet. With a sword in his fingertips, he pierced the eyes of the divine weapon puppet. Outcome after that could be imagined. King Hades pulled the other party out from the puppet and killed him on the spot without holding back at all, taking the puppet for himself. This caused many people to feel a chill run down their spines. This King Hades was truly ruthless in his actions. Does this battle platform not restrict the cultivation base of the participants? Qin Wentian asked Bai-Lu-Yi. No, this is a special battle platform. If a divine inscriptionist wishes to participate, it's fine as long as it's someone of the same level. Not only that, they can only rely on their divine inscriptions or puppets to fight. If you don't have the confidence, don't participate, Bai-Lu-Yi replied in a low voice. After which, Qin Wentian saw Bai-Lu-Yi standing up and walking towards the passageway ahead. That passageway was where the participants were supposed to enter. Bai-Lu-Yi wanted to participate in the Battle of Divine Inscriptions. Interesting. Qin Wentian laughed. In the following battles, Hades consecutively defeated 2 more participants, and he didn't seem to have any intentions of stopping. He continued to accept challenges. Hades against Flaming Rose, the voice of the judge rang out, causing many to exclaim in surprise. Flaming Rose actually participated in the battle. Not only that, she was challenging Hades. In the Hell Arena, there were many famous people. Hades and Flaming Rose belonged to this category because they had both achieved glorious battle achievements in the past. Hades, 3rd-ranked Divine Inscriptionist, battle record, 68 wins, 5 defeats. Flaming Rose, 3rd-ranked Divine Inscriptionist, battle record, 76 wins, 3 defeats. The judge announced the results of the 2 combatants, pushing the atmosphere to a new peak. Flaming Rose walked up the Hell Arena. She was clad in a red cloak, exuding a valiant and formidable-looking aura. Her fiery red rose mask concealed her long hair and countenance, causing the spectators to want to see her countenance under the mask. It can't be her, right? Qin Wentian frowned. Cold Bai Lu, her name was Flaming Rose. Hee, I really want to see if Flaming Rose is beautiful or not. Hades' hoarse voice rang out, as his puppet dashed towards Flaming Rose. Flaming Rose similarly released her puppet. It was a female puppet, and although it wasn't a humanoid puppet, it was extremely similar. With a wave of her hand, a gigantic shield appeared in front of her. Flaming Rose stomped on the ground, as inscriptions of inscriptions manifested on the platform. Qin Wentian observed seriously. Regardless of Hades or Flaming Rose, the speed at which they inscribed the inscriptions were completed was extremely fast. Not only that, their consistency was also extremely terrifying. Rain of Swords. Qin Wentian only saw the divine inscriptions beneath Flaming Rose's feet turning into innumerable sharp swords that rained down on Hades. Her puppet only defended and didn't attack, completely delaying Hades's puppet. Great Rock, Ancient Sword, Gigantic Axe, Thunderbolt. Qin Wentian watched as Flaming Rose used her divine inscriptions to attack, and he felt a sense of dizziness in his heart. It was too fascinating, her attacks were unceasing, as though there would be no end to them. Towards the end, the space between the two of them seemed to have transformed into a tempest of divine inscriptions, as boundless divine inscriptions flooded the entire space. The might of their battle was truly terrifying. Boom! Finally, Flaming Rose's great rock managed to injure Hades. Hades immediately took out another puppet, as he fled the Hell Arena. His speed of escape was extremely fast. To think that a battle of divine inscriptions could be so profound. Qin Wentian sighed in his heart. The Grand Xia Empire was truly too fascinating. Chapter 237. After Flaming Rose defeated Hades, she left the arena. Not long after, Bai Lui returned to the spectator stands, only to see Qin Wentian looking at her with a smile that was not a smile. What are you looking at? Bai Lui noticed Qin Wentian staring at her, and a strange expression appeared on her face. Flaming Rose, Qin Wentian whispered in Bai Lui's ears, causing her to glare fiercely at him. How much is the reward for a Yuanfu cultivator? Qin Wentian asked in a low voice. It depends on one's battle record and the specific situation. Normally, those with good battle records would receive a high reward for every victory they win. For those without any battle records, the reward would be extremely low. For example, Azura, the reward for every victory he won was extremely high. Flaming Rose replied to Qin Wentian. What about you? You have such a good battle record, Qin Wentian laughed. Not even 100 yuan meteor stones, Bai Lui replied, as if admitting that she was Flaming Rose. Third heavenly layer. Qin Wentian's countenance stiffened. This reward was simply too frightening. Of course, Bai Lui replied with disdain. How profitable. Qin Wentian's eyes gleamed with sharpness. I'll go and give it a try. Qin Wentian stood up and walked forward. Leng Ning, who was behind him, involuntarily called out, Where are you going? Qin Wentian turned his head back and smiled, I'm going to the Hell Arena. Are you crazy? If you don't have Yuan meteor stones, I can give you some. Are you courting death by going to the Hell Arena? Leng Ning's countenance turned cold as she berated Qin Wentian, even if you win a few battles by luck, you won't be able to obtain any Yuan meteor stones. Only true experts with shocking battle records would be able to earn enough Yuan meteor stones. Hearing Leng Ning's words, Qin Wentian laughed. Although this lass's tone wasn't very nice, she was concerned about him. The nervousness in her eyes was real. You knew I couldn't do it. Qin Wentian glared at Leng Ning. Teacher Bailu, can you persuade this fellow? Leng Ning turned her gaze onto Bailu. Why would I persuade him? How could a third-rank divine inscriptionist die so easily? Even if he was defeated, he should at least have some life-saving methods. Go ahead then. Death will bring peace and quiet. Leng Ning cursed. Qin Wendian smiled, but didn't say anything. He walked towards the passageway and entered the Hell Arena. The passageway was like a winding mountain range, with numerous passageways leading to different locations. Are you a newcomer or a veteran? A man beside the passage asked Qin Wendian. Newbie. Follow me. That person led Qin Wendian to a passageway and arrived at a cave abode. There were many masks, cloaks, and other outfits here that could completely conceal one's figure. Take your pick. That person stated. Qin Wendian saw a Kirin mask, and he couldn't help but recall the scene back in the Dream Sky Forest. Smiling, he took off the mask and chose a cloak as well as an ice armor. Cultivation base, codename? That person coldly asked. Second level of Yuan Fu, codename, Kirin, Qin Wendian replied. Okay, newbie, I'll bring you around to familiarize yourself with the rules and environment. That person recorded it down and brought Qin Wendian out of the cavern. He brought Qin Wendian around the Hell Arena a few times until someone matched up with him. Only then did he bring Qin Wendian up to the Hell Arena. Opposite Qin Wendian stood a person with a bronze mask. This person's codename was none other than Bronze. Bronze, second level of Yuan Fu, battle record, 18 wins, 2 losses. Kirin, second level of Yuan Fu, battle record, 0, the judge's voice rang out, causing the interest of many to be piqued. Betting on newbies was always the most interesting, because nobody knew how strong they were. I love bullying newbies the most. Bronze's eyes flickered with a cold light as he stared at Qin Wendian. Qin Wendian didn't reply. To him, the Hell Arena was a treasure trove for him to earn Yuan Meteor Stones. Today, he would just have to grind some battle records first. Only then would he be able to earn more rewards. Before he left Chu, he had brought quite a lot of Yuan Meteor Stones with him. But if he didn't replenish his Yuan Meteor Stones, it would definitely affect his future cultivation. After the time it takes for an incense stick to burn, the judge announced the start of the battle. Bronze stepped out as clanging sounds rang out from his body. A heavy pressure enveloped Qin Wendian as his fists glowed with a bronze luster, containing a terrifyingly heavy might within. Mandate. Qin Wendian's countenance stiffened, he could feel the might of his opponent's mandate. It was extremely heavy and powerful. Even the pupils of Bronze's eyes were shimmering with an azure light. Bronze's battle record, 18 wins, 2 losses, could be said to be extremely glorious. Yet for him, his battle record was 0. Evidently, very few people thought highly of Qin Wendian. It was as though they could already see the scene of Qin Wendian being crushed by a single punch from Bronze. Qin Wendian clenched his fists tightly, causing cracking sounds to ring out as demonic intent permeated the air. He only felt a terrifying amount of energy contained within his fist as the divine energy within his Yuan Fu frenziedly flowed into his arms. Qin Wendian's silhouette transformed into a series of afterimages as his icy cloak fluttered in the wind. His fist blasted out, directly colliding with the bronze statue. Boom! Both of their fists collided, fist against fist. This was the most direct and most tyrannical collision. Cracking sounds rang out. Bronze felt as though his arm was about to shatter. He groaned in agony as a fearsome might gushed into his arm. His body was flung through the air, slamming into the ground as he coughed out a mouthful of blood. A pressure as heavy as a mountain bore down on him. Bronze inclined his head, only to see Qin Wendian standing right in front of him. Qin Wendian's countenance drastically changed, I concede. His icy cloak fluttered in the wind. Qin Wendian stood with his hands clasped behind his back. He didn't make a move, he merely nodded his head to Bronze. Many thanks. Bronze stood up and clasped his hands to Qin Wendian, he was completely convinced. Because the identities of those in the Hell Arena were kept secret, many of them were extremely ruthless and merciless. Yet, the person in front of him had spared his life. Qilin wins. Do you wish to continue? The judge asked Qin Wendian. Qin Wentian lightly nodded his head. He was here to gain some battle achievements. This Qilin is indeed strong, he actually defeated bronze so easily. The crowd mused. Following that, Qin Wentian continued to fight, and the spectators heard the same thing. Qilin wins. Qilin wins. Qilin wins 10 consecutive victories. Qilin wins 15 consecutive victories. Voices rang out one after another, as the gazes of many turned to the Hell Arena on the left. Winning a few battles was easy, but winning over 10 battles in a row was extremely difficult. That was because there were many powerful characters among the challengers. Even those seated in the spectator stands couldn't help but step into the Hell Arena to challenge Qin Wentian. Hence, a strange phenomenon occurred in the Hell Arena today. There were actually many newcomers who had 0 battle achievements, yet their combat prowess was extremely powerful. However, the result was still defeat. Qilin had already obtained 30 consecutive victories, 0 defeats. Is it that fellow? Bai Lui stared at the figure of Qilin in the Hell Arena. She couldn't be sure if it was Qin Wentian. After all, there were quite a few newcomers who had 0 battle achievements, and all of them wore masks and cloaks to conceal their features. Anyone could have been Qin Wentian. He shouldn't be this strong, right? Bai Lui mused. After 30 consecutive victories, Qilin finally stopped accepting challenges and walked down the Hell Arena, causing many to feel a sense of regret. Not long after, Qin Wentian returned to the spectator stands, a light smile on his face. 30 consecutive victories, it could be considered a small harvest for him today. How was it? How does it feel to be oppressed? Leng Ning glared at Qin Wentian. Which one are you? Cold Blade? Cold Moon? Or Ancient Pine? The names Leng Ning mentioned were all newcomers who had 0 battle achievements against Qilin. I'm Qilin. Qin Wentian laughed. Although the Hell Arena could keep one's identity a secret, as long as one paid attention to it, there were still some who didn't care about keeping it a secret. For example, if Bai Lui went to the Hell Arena in front of them, these people might have guessed that she was the Flame Rose. But Bai Lui obviously didn't care about keeping it a secret. Leng Ning rolled her eyes, completely speechless at this fellow's ability to boast. You're lucky that Qilin's methods weren't ruthless. If not, would you still be here today? Don't be so rash next time. Leng Ning curled her lips. Qilin, who had 30 consecutive victories, should have already reached a level where he could fight against those at the 3rd level of Yuanfu. Okay, let's return, Bai Lui spoke, as the spectators nodded their heads. It was already late, it was time to head back. On the way back, Bai Lui and Qin Wentian walked in front, causing Leng Ning's lips to twitch. This brat liked to talk big, but he was really good at picking up girls. Are you really Qilin? Bai Lui stealthily asked Qin Wentian, as a hint of curiosity flashed in her eyes. Yes. Qin Wentian knew that Bai Lui had an innocent side to her, and he smiled as he nodded his head. His words caused Bai Lui's eyes to flash with a strange light. What a mysterious fellow. Come to the White Deer Institute tomorrow and study divine inscriptions with me. I'll bring you around the institute today. Right. Qin Wentian nodded his head, and the group returned to the White Deer Institute. Bai Lui halted her steps as she spoke to the crowd. This 1-month period shall end here. If any of you wish to continue on a deeper level, you can apply to the administrator of the White Deer Institute. That's all for now. After speaking, Bai Lui cast a glance at Qin Wentian, and the two of them walked towards the White Deer Institute. Wait a minute. A cold voice abruptly drifted over. Yan Kong's countenance was extremely unsightly to behold. Bai Lui hadn't even announced the name of the participant, and she had already left. In the past, everyone had assumed that he would be chosen. This caused him to feel extremely humiliated. Is there anything else? Bai Lui asked, her tone cold. Miss Bai Lu, didn't you say that you wanted to choose someone to study divine inscriptions with you? Yan Kong politely asked. I've already made my choice, there's no need to report it to you. Bai Lu Yi was clearly unhappy. Her meaning was very clear. What else did Yan Kong want? Yan Kong, still want to ask, who did Miss Bai Lu choose? Yan Kong's countenance grew even colder, and the crowd could feel that something was wrong with the atmosphere. It seemed like Yan Kong was truly enraged. Scram! Bai Lu Yi's countenance turned even colder when she saw that Yan Kong was still pestering her. Hee, we've been following Miss Bai Lu for a month now, and Miss Bai Lu wanted to choose someone to study divine inscriptions with you. Shouldn't she have chosen the one with the highest attainment in the Tao of divine inscriptions? But now, Miss Bai Lu actually chose him. Yan Kong's heart was filled with rage when he saw Bai Lu Yi telling him to scram. Although the White Deer Institute was extremely famous, his Yan clan wasn't weak either. As he thought of this, he coldly laughed. Miss Bai Lu, are you acting like this because you've fallen in love? You. Bai Lu Yi was so angry that her body trembled involuntarily. Let me do it. Qin Wentian nodded his head in response to Bai Lu Yi's anger. His countenance also gradually turned cold. Some people wouldn't give up until they were taught a lesson. Chapter 238. Seeing that Qin Wentian was willing to stand up for her, Bai Lu Yi smiled and nodded her head. This scene caused Yan Kong's countenance to turn even colder. As expected, Bai Lu Yi would never show such a smile to anyone else. Yan Kong's heart was filled with hatred and jealousy. Qin Wentian took a step forward, standing in front of Bai Lu Yi as he asked, do you think that your attainment in the Tao of divine inscriptions is the highest among us? Yan Kong stared at Qin Wentian, his countenance cold as he replied, why? Do you want to give it a try? Please enlighten me. Qin Wentian continued walking forward as he stared intently at Yan Kong. At this moment, he no longer had that carefree expression on his face. His eyes shone with a brilliant light, causing people to feel as though they were enveloped by a layer of light. At this moment, the change in Qin Wentian's aura caused Leng Ning's heart to pound. This fellow's aura had suddenly changed. Self-confidence, sharpness, and the frivolity of youth, these were the traits Qin Wentian exuded at this moment. This fellow, even if he's confident, can his attainment in the Tao of divine inscriptions really surpass Yan Kong's? Leng Ning's heart pounded. She didn't know why, but when she saw the change in Qin Wentian, an indescribable sense of anticipation bloomed in her heart. Hee. Yan Kong coldly laughed as his aura gushed forth. The surrounding crowd retreated, giving way to Yan Kong and Qin Wentian. The shadow of an astral soul appeared above Yan Kong's head. It was a golden palm imprint, and the palm print astral soul shone with a unique golden luster. This astral soul was a type of forging astral soul. The shadow of an astral soul also appeared above Yan Kong's palm, turning golden in color. Numerous runic lines flowed on the surface of the palm imprint, transforming into a mystical glow. The runic inscriptions on Yan Kong's palms circulated unceasingly, gradually forming the illusory image of a dragon. Although it was a little simple, even a simple dragon-shaped divine inscription could be considered an extraordinary divine inscription. Look carefully. Yan Kong laughed coldly. After which, he slammed his palms into the ground, causing the inscriptions of dragons to appear on the ground. Roar! A low draconic roar rang out as a golden dragon lunged towards Qin Wentian. With a thunderous boom, the golden dragon slammed into Qin Wentian, causing a few lacerations to appear on Qin Wentian's robes. Although Qin Wentian wasn't injured, it still showed how extraordinary this divine imprint was. The standard of a peak-level second-ranked divine inscriptionist is only a step away from the third-ranked. The hearts of the spectators palpitated. It was highly likely that Yan Kong would step into the ranks of a third-ranked divine inscriptionist within half a year. Yan Kong stood with his hands clasped behind his back, staring at Qin Wentian with a cold smile. He wanted to see how Bai Lu Yi would deal with him after Qin Wentian was defeated by him. Are you done? Qin Wentian asked in a low voice, his words causing the smile on Yan Kong's face to stiffen. It's your turn now. Boom! Qin Wentian stomped his foot on the ground. Instantly, the shadow of a great rock manifested above his head, gushing towards Yan Kong. And here I was wondering what level you are at. Yan Kong coldly laughed as he stared at the shadow of the great rock. However, before the sound of his voice faded, Qin Wentian stepped out once more as the shadow of the great rock manifested once more. Boom, boom, boom. Qin Wentian advanced step by step, his footsteps seemed to have a unique rhythm to them. The shadow of the great rock manifested an even more profound and mysterious divine inscriptions, as more and more great rocks rushed towards Yan Kong. Yan Kong waved his arms impatiently, trying to defend himself. Something's wrong, something's wrong. Qin Wentian slowly stepped out, his countenance stiffening as he sensed that something was wrong. The great rock beneath his feet was still in the midst of forming a new divine inscription. Leng Ning's dainty hands were tightly clenched into fists. All of a sudden, she felt her heartbeat quickening as she stared unblinkingly at Qin Wentian. The shadow of the great rock was still in the midst of forming a new divine inscription. Finally, the silhouettes of the great rocks reformed. On the ground, an incomparably gigantic picture of a great rock appeared, blotting out the skies. A terrifying aura gushed forth, yet Qin Wentian was still as carefree as ever. Abruptly, all the great rocks started to move. They transformed into different parts of the great rock as a terrifying might gushed forth. The great rock soared through the skies, howling in rage as it shot towards Yan Kong. Its incomparably sharp claws were so sharp that it felt as though it wanted to tear Yan Kong's head apart. Yan Kong's countenance drastically changed. He hurriedly retreated as his aura gushed forth in a frenzy. With a howl of rage, both of his palms formed an ancient imprint that blasted out, colliding with the projection of the great rock as a terrifying sound echoed out. The shadow of the great rock gradually dissipated, leaving Yan Kong in a sorry state. Silence filled the air as the gazes of the spectators landed on Qin Wentian. Even Bai Lu Yi was stunned. Qin Wentian's attainments in the Tao of Divine Inscriptions had far exceeded her expectations. This was also the first time she saw Qin Wentian displaying his prowess in the Tao of Divine Inscriptions. Could this fellow really be a genius in the Tao of Divine Inscriptions? Third-rank Divine Inscriptions, able to suppress Yuanfu cultivators. This fellow is a third-rank Divine Inscriptionist. The crowd stared at Qin Wentian. Only now did they understand that they had misunderstood. How was it that Bai Lu Yi had fallen in love with him? It was clear that Qin Wentian's talent had caused her to look at him in a different light. Thinking of this, many in the crowd couldn't help but feel ashamed. Upon seeing that Qin Wentian was a third-rank divine inscriptionist, the jealousy in their hearts instantly vanished. Third-ranked. Leng Ning's entire body stiffened as she exclaimed in shock. Her beautiful eyes stared unblinkingly at Qin Wentian. At this moment, her countenance was extremely fascinating to behold, as her heart pounded unceasingly in her chest. Third-ranked, this bastard was really a third-ranked divine inscriptionist. That fellow who liked to talk big, something's wrong. Leng Ning's face reddened. He was originally a third-ranked divine inscriptionist, why did he have to talk big? This was clearly the truth. This bastard. Leng Ning stomped her feet in agitation. Her beautiful eyes shone with a brilliant light. She was so agitated that she didn't know what she was thinking. No wonder that fellow was so good at acting, putting on an unfathomable appearance. However, when she thought of the words she had said that she would marry him if he was a third-ranked divine inscriptionist, Leng Ning's face flushed red. She snuck a glance at Qin Wentian, feeling somewhat embarrassed. Qin Wentian calmly stared at Yan Kong as he asked, "Your attainment in the Tao of Divine Inscriptions is the highest?" Yan Kong's countenance alternated between shades of green and white. How ironic. Not long ago, he was still so confident in his abilities, yet today, he was being humiliated in front of everyone. "You want to kill me?" Yan Kong instantly changed the topic. A terrifying aura gushed forth from him as he dashed towards Qin Wentian, his eyes flashing with a cold light. "Yan Kong, you shameless bastard! Leng Ning, who was still in shock, felt the killing intent radiating from Yan Kong. Her countenance drastically changed. This Yan Kong was simply too shameless. After losing to Qin Wentian in terms of attainment in the Tao of Divine Inscriptions, he actually dared to make a move. Given the strength of his Yan clan, even if he injured Qin Wentian, no one would be able to do anything to him. Golden Dragon Imprint. Yan Kong's palms blasted out, containing a trace of draconic might in them. It was as though a golden dragon was whistling through the air, exuding a terrifying sharpness that could annihilate everything. The mandate that Yan Kong had comprehended was the mandate of metal. Of the 5 elements, metal was extremely tyrannical and sharp. The first level of insight of the mandate of metal was penetrative, causing his attacks to contain an extremely powerful destructive force. Upon seeing Yan Kong suddenly making a move against him, Qin Wentian's eyes flashed with a cold light. Demonic qi gushed forth from his palms as the divine inscriptions in his arterial circulation pathway throbbed. Falling mountain palms. Qin Wentian blasted out. Currently, his mastery of the falling mountain palms had already reached the pinnacle of perfection. His attack was akin to a gigantic mountain smashing downwards. Especially since the falling mountain palms were infused with the mandate of force, the might of the falling mountain palms was simply too terrifying. The golden dragon imprint collided with the falling mountain palms. The golden dragon seemed to be on the verge of shattering as a deafening rumble echoed out. After which, the spectators only saw a blurry silhouette appearing, as well as a series of afterimages. Kaboom! A terrifying sound thundered out, and the spectators only saw cracks appearing on a stone pillar not far away. Yan Kong's body had been slammed ruthlessly into the stone pillar, and a hand could be seen protruding from his chest. Qin Wentian stood beside him, his hands clutching onto Yan Kong's chest, exuding a cold and tyrannical aura. This. The hearts of the spectators pounded unceasingly. Leng Ning drew in a deep breath. Was this still the Qin Wentian who loved to boast? That Qin Wentian who had an indifferent expression on his face, his eyes clean, his features handsome, and a smile always hanging on his face? Qin Wentian abruptly pulled on Yan Kong's arm, flinging him onto the ground. Yan Kong was sprawled on the ground, and just as he was about to lift his head, he saw Qin Wentian's icy gaze staring at him. Apologize to Teacher Bailu. Yan Kong wiped the traces of blood from the corner of his mouth as he stared at Qin Wentian. A ruthless light flickered in his eyes, but he didn't apologize. Instead, he wanted to stand up. Boom! Qin Wentian flipped his palms and blasted out, causing Yan Kong's body to instantly collapse to the ground as he coughed out fresh blood. Apologize. Qin Wentian's voice rang out. A light wind ruffled his robes, and at this moment, a different kind of light radiated from him. Tyrannical, frivolous. Before this, he already knew that Yan Kong had malicious intentions towards him, and had even threatened him before. It was just that this was his first time in the Moon continent, and he couldn't be bothered to care about such things. After all, he had his own matters to attend to. Yan Kong was just a small matter to him, but there were some people who wanted to cross his bottom line. Since that was the case, he could only suppress them. Do you know what you are doing? Yan Kong roared in a low voice, wanting to get up once more. Boom! As the sound of his voice faded, Qin Wentian's foot directly stomped down on his back, ruthlessly pressing him to the ground once more. If Yan Kong wasn't convinced, then he would torture him until he was convinced. 3 breaths of time, this is your final chance, Qin Wentian's emotionless voice rang out. You dare! Yan Kong howled in rage. Despite being trampled on by Qin Wentian, he was unable to get up. 1 breath. Qin Wentian coldly stated. Yan Kong's countenance contorted with malevolence, he felt extremely humiliated. 2 breaths. Qin Wentian stated once more. A killing intent gushed forth from him, causing the entire space to turn cold, akin to an icy cavern. Yan Kong's entire body trembled as he felt the killing intent seeping into his body. At this moment, he suddenly felt fear. 3. I apologize. Even before Qin Wendian could finish his sentence, Yan Kong already closed his eyes in agony. Today, he had already accepted his fate. Miss Bailu, I, Yan Kong, have spoken rudely and deserve to be punished. I'm sorry. Yan Kong was forced to apologize, and he felt even more terrible than death. Since you have to apologize sooner or later, why do you insist on being tortured? Why bother? Qin Wendian shifted his foot away as a faint smile appeared on his face. The coldness radiating from him vanished in an instant, and the smile on his face returned to its former tranquil state. However, the scene earlier was deeply imprinted into the minds of the spectators. They would never be able to forget it. Chapter 239. Yan Kong finally climbed up, coughed a few times, and left without saying a word. He, Yan Kong, had never suffered such humiliation before. He would definitely remember this debt. Leng Ning walked to Qin Wentian's side, her beautiful eyes unblinking as she stared at Qin Wentian. The corners of her lips curled up in a smile, and upon seeing the carefree expression on Qin Wentian's face, she giggled. Leng Ning pays her respects to Grandmaster Divine Inscriptionist. Qin Wentian couldn't help but knock her head lightly upon seeing her mischievous expression. Now you know I didn't lie to you, right? Yes, you didn't lie to me. It's all my fault, I shouldn't have doubted a grandmaster like you. Leng Ning smiled. However, who would have thought that you were so powerful? Can't you show off a little? Don't tell me you want me to angrily inscribe a third-ranked divine inscription in front of you and flaunt my prowess? Qin Wentian shrugged. Upon hearing Qin Wentian's words, Leng Ning couldn't help but giggle. Was it possible that Qin Wentian would rush over and inscribe a third-ranked divine inscription in front of her to flaunt? Wasn't that a little too arrogant? Even if what you said is right, it's all my fault. Leng Ning glared at Qin Wentian, yet she was extremely happy in her heart. This arrogant fellow was actually a third-ranked divine inscriptionist. Even now, she couldn't help but feel her heart pounding with disbelief. However, as she recalled the ambiguous words she had said to Qin Wentian, she couldn't help but feel embarrassed. All right, you can return first, I still have some matters to attend to. Qin Wentian spoke as he walked over to Bai Lu Yi's side. Bai Lu Yi nodded to Qin Wentian as she replied in a low voice, thank you. Earlier, Qin Wentian had beaten up Yan Kong because of her. This happened because of me. It's my duty to make you suffer a bad reputation. Qin Wentian didn't seem to mind it at all. The two of them walked side by side into the White Deer Institute. You have to be more careful in the future, Yan Kong will definitely bear a grudge against you. A hint of worry flashed in Bai Lu Yi's eyes. How could Yan Kong let go of such humiliation? Yes, I will. Qin Wentian nodded his head. This was also the reason why he didn't cripple or kill Yan Kong. If he killed or crippled Yan Kong, the Yan clan would definitely not let this matter rest. However, he only wanted to beat Yan Kong up a little. He didn't believe that Yan Kong would have the face to go back and look for the elders of the Yan clan. If he was beaten up by someone of the same generation, Yan Kong wouldn't be able to lift his head high in the Yan clan in the future. Leng Ning stared at the back of the two of them in a daze. Among the younger generation of the White Deer Institute, Bai Lu Yi was the most outstanding genius, Qin Wentian. She was as aloof as frost, and as gentle as the clouds and wind, she was the genius divine inscriptionist Qin Wentian. The two of them walking together made Leng Ning feel a sense of loneliness. What am I thinking about? Leng Ning shook her head. She couldn't possibly want to marry that arrogant fellow, right? Bai Lu Yi brought Qin Wentian to the White Deer Cavern. This was also the place where he first entered the White Deer Institute. However, they only went to the outermost layer of the cavern walls, as well as the stone tablets for the inscription test. They didn't enter the depths of the cavern. And now, Bai Lu Yi personally led him into the depths of the cavern. Within the first cavern dwelling, there were many stone walls and stone tablets. Densely packed divine inscriptions were inscribed on the stone walls, dazzling the eyes. As for the divine inscriptions on the stone tablets, they were even more intricate and exquisite. Not only that, the divine inscriptions were inscribed by grandmasters. The number of divine inscriptions here is the highest, and many of them were inscribed by the elders of the White Deer Institute. As long as you can comprehend and control these divine inscriptions, you would definitely be able to become a peak-level divine inscriptionist. At the very least, you wouldn't lack divine inscriptions when forging weapons, Bai Lu-yi explained to Qin Wentian. After which, she led Qin Wentian deeper into the cavern. The second cavern was filled with gigantic stone walls, and on the stone walls, there were complete diagrams of divine inscriptions engraved. It was as though two people were battling using divine inscriptions. Every stone wall was like a battle diagram of divine inscriptions. Qin Wentian arrived in front of a stone rampart as he stared at the divine inscriptions on it. Abruptly, he only felt a surge of destructive energy gushing towards him. Those divine inscriptions seemed as though they wanted to leap out from the stone rampart. How exquisite! Qin Wentian's heart trembled. Let's continue to the front. Bai Lu-yi spoke to Qin Wentian as they walked towards the third cavern dwelling. This cavern dwelling was even larger, and Qin Wentian could sense that the divine inscriptions here were filled with a mysterious aura. Abruptly, Qin Wentian halted his steps. He could sense that the space around him had changed. It was as though he was no longer in the cavern dwelling. Instead, there was a gust of wind in the air, and each gust of wind was as sharp as a blade. The Tao of Divine Inscriptions. Qin Wentian mused. He closed his eyes and used his heart to sense the divine inscriptions. He could see many divine inscriptions that seemed to have a life of their own. They danced unceasingly, transforming into a formation. A hand abruptly appeared, tapping on one of the whirlpools of divine inscriptions. A crisp sound rang out as the wind calmed down. Qin Wentian saw Bai Lu-yi appearing before him. She smiled at him. How do you feel? You're so at ease to bring me here. Qin Wentian laughed. To divine inscriptionists, this White Deer Cavern was definitely a treasure trove. If we want to develop the Tao of divine inscriptions, just relying on the strength of the White Deer Institute isn't enough. Many of the divine inscriptions here were created by the previous generations of the White Deer Institute. Bai Lu-yi laughed. It's not good to be stingy. Not only that, given your talent in the Tao of divine inscriptions, I believe that we can mutually benefit each other. There's still the last cavern dwelling. Follow my footsteps, or we'll be trapped in another formation. Bai Lu-yi led the way as Qin Wentian stepped into the fourth cavern dwelling. This cavern dwelling was similarly gigantic, and there were many puppets within. There were humanoid puppets, divine weapon puppets, beast-type puppets, all sorts of puppets. Seems like I'll have to stay in the White Deer Institute in the future. Don't look down on me, Qin Wentian laughed. The divine inscriptions here had opened up a huge door for him. As long as you're willing, I'll provide food and drinks for you, Bai Lu-yi laughed. I'll remember this. Don't regret it. Qin Wentian stared at Bai Lu-yi's pure and innocent countenance, feeling that this cold beauty was getting more and more adorable. What made Bai Lu-yi surprised was that she didn't expect Qin Wentian's words to be true. From that day onwards, Qin Wentian didn't even take half a step out of the White Deer Cavern. Other than cultivating, all he did was research on the Tao of divine inscriptions. This caused Bai Lu-yi to be deeply moved. Initially, she had always thought that she was very hardworking, but Qin Wentian was even more hardworking than her, even crazier than her. Once he immersed himself in the Tao of divine inscriptions, it would be hard for him to extricate himself. Sometimes, Bai Lu-yi would stand behind him for half a day, yet he wouldn't even glance at her. This caused Bai Lu-yi to feel as though she had suffered a huge blow. She had never received such cold treatment before. In the past, who didn't want to stay by her side? But at the same time, Bai Lu-yi couldn't help but sigh. No one was born a genius. Even if they were talented, they still had to rely on their own hard work to achieve the title of a true genius. Among the major characters she had heard of before, which one of them didn't have a resolute heart, as well as a strong will to cultivate? Sitting beside Qin Wentian, Bai Lui stared at Qin Wentian, who was in a trance. It was as though she could see a peerless genius walking on the path of ascension. Qin Wentian's hard work also influenced Bai Lui. She watched as Qin Wentian improved day by day. Now, Qin Wentian could actually fight against her head-on in the Tao of Divine Inscriptions without being at a disadvantage. This caused Bai Lui to put in even more effort in her cultivation. What are you thinking about again? Eat some fruits. In the fourth cavern, Bai Lui noticed that Qin Wentian was deep in thought. She placed a plate of fruits in front of Qin Wentian. The Tao of puppets is too mystical. Qin Wentian inclined his head and saw a pure and beautiful countenance. His mood couldn't help but improve as he tossed the fruit into his mouth. Of course, Bai Lui smiled as she sat opposite Qin Wentian. After so many days, have you gained any insights? Do you want to know? Qin Wentian laughed. Bai Lui nodded, of course. What do you think a puppet is? Qin Wentian asked. A puppet is a puppet, what else is there? Bai Lui froze. In my opinion, a puppet is a divine weapon. Qin Wentian laughed. Puppets can be categorized into humanoid puppets, divine weapon puppets, beast puppets, and so on. Other than some evil cultivators who use real humans to create puppets, the other puppets are all created from the outer shell of a divine weapon. Divine inscriptions are engraved on the outer shell, and the divine weapon is powered by Yuan meteor stones. What's the difference between a puppet and a divine weapon? A puppet is just a complicated divine weapon. For a divine weapon with inscriptions, it can convert the astral energy within Yuan meteor stones into the power of the puppet, and the power it can unleash is derived from the materials it was created from. Isn't this a unique characteristic of a divine weapon? The higher the grade of the materials used to create a divine weapon, the more powerful the divine inscriptions engraved on it, and the higher the grade of the divine weapon. It's just that a puppet is a humanoid divine weapon, and the amount of power it can unleash is much higher. However, the cost of creating one is also much higher. Qin Wentian smiled. Bai Lui pondered for a moment before nodding her head. I didn't think of it that way, but from what you've said, the disparity is indeed not that great. The Creator is truly marvelous. Have you ever thought that the meridians of the human body have the same characteristics as divine inscriptions? The creation of divine weapons and puppets requires divine inscriptions to be engraved on the meridians, just like the arterial circulation that we cultivate, allowing our innate techniques to be unleashed and unleash tyrannical power. Think about it, wouldn't the fusion of innate techniques and arterial circulation be similar to the divine inscriptions engraved on divine weapons and puppets? Qin Wentian continued, not only that, for those of us who have a forging-type astral soul, our greatest advantage is that we can create divine inscriptions within our bodies and unleash them at will. In that case, if every single drop of astral energy is formed from divine inscriptions, would there still be a need for us to create divine inscriptions? Astral energy is divine inscriptions. If that's the case, doesn't that mean that everyone is an innate weaponsmith? Qin Wentian's calm words had a huge impact on Bai Lui. She had only followed the teachings of her elders, and had never thought about it so deeply before. This was also the reason why she hoped to learn divine inscriptions from other outstanding youths. Everyone had their own unique views and insights on cultivation, but her experience was all taught by her elders. Hence, her understanding of divine inscriptions was the same as that of her elders, and there was no way for her to have a clash of ideas. Qin Wentian had given her a huge impact on her thinking. Bai Lui's eyes shone with a brilliant light as she stared at Qin Wentian. After which, she smiled, thank you. I hope my insights will be of some help to you. Qin Wentian laughed. This was something he should do. There's a commotion outside. Let's go out and take a look. At this moment, Bai Lui stood up and walked out. Qin Wentian followed behind her as they exited the White Deer Cavern. Outside the cavern, an ethereal silhouette appeared. Her face was veiled with a green veil, resembling a celestial maiden. It seemed that she wanted to enter the White Deer Cavern, but was obstructed by someone. "What's the matter?" Qin Wentian asked in a low voice as he saw Qing-er. Qing-er saw Qin Wentian, and her melodious voice drifted out, "I haven't seen you for a few days, and I was a little worried. I wanted to go in and take a look." Qin Wentian froze when he heard Qing-er's melodious voice. He felt moved in his heart. So it turned out that this cold lass had never left his side. "Since you're fine, I'll take my leave." Qing-er turned and walked out, disappearing from Qin Wentian's sight as though she had never appeared before. Chapter 240. After Qing-er left, Bai Lu Yi's beautiful eyes stared at Qin Wentian, as a strange expression appeared on her face. That transcendent young lady earlier had given her a breathtaking feeling. Even though she couldn't see her face, standing in front of her made her feel a sense of loss. Although that young lady's tone was indifferent, it was evident that she cared deeply for Qin Wentian. This fellow was getting more and more mysterious. "Little E, who is he?" At this moment, the old man guarding the entrance of the White Deer Cavern asked. He knew that Bai Lu Yi had brought Qin Wentian into the White Deer Cavern, but he wouldn't interfere in her matters. But now that someone wanted to barge into the White Deer Cavern because of Qin Wentian, he had no choice but to ask. "Uncle Liang, he's my friend, Qin Wentian," Bai Lu Yi replied. "Little E, Uncle Liang won't interfere when you make friends, but you have to be careful. You should know that many people in the clan are paying attention to you. You've interacted too much with this person," the old man warned. Currently, although no one in the White Deer Institute had asked about this matter due to Bai Lu Yi's status, there were already many who were discussing this matter. "Uncle Liang, I know," Bai Lu Yi helplessly replied. Uncle Liang nodded his head, and no longer asked, he turned and departed. "Sorry for the trouble," Qin Wentian said in a low voice as he walked to her side. Bai Lu Yi's beautiful eyes stared at Qin Wentian, as she casually laughed. "Why would there be so much trouble? We don't even have anything to do with it." "Ah." Qin Wentian froze. His eyes flickered as he stared at Bai Lu Yi's pure and innocent face. Her fair neck was like that of a swan, and her voluptuous peaks. As the saying goes, the face of an angel, the figure of a devil. "What are you looking at?" "I'm just making an analogy." Bai Lu Yi stomped her feet, glaring fiercely at Qin Wentian as she turned and entered the White Deer Cavern. Her flirtatious expression caused Qin Wentian to fall into a daze. "What a seductive beauty! What are you thinking about?" Qin Wentian patted his head speechlessly. After which, he thought of Qingcheng as the smile on his face faded away. Drawing in a deep breath, he turned his gaze in the direction of the Pill Emperor Hall. "It's been so long. How is she?" Bang! In the Pill Emperor Hall, a muffled sound rang out from the cauldron. Mo Qingcheng's beautiful eyes froze as a look of helplessness could be seen on her exquisite countenance. Why was she feeling so uneasy? "Junior sister, what's wrong?" Bai Fei stared at Mo Qingcheng as she asked. Mo Qingcheng had a 7 apertures heart, and her success rate in pill concoction was extremely high. "I'm going out for a walk." Mo Qingcheng walked out of the cauldron, causing Bai Fei to pause for a moment. She then followed Mo Qingcheng out of the cauldron and onto the stone steps outside. The rays of the sun shone down on Mo Qingcheng, adding a halo of gentleness to her beauty. Bai Fei stared at the dazzling Mo Qingcheng, feeling an indescribable sense of inferiority. Once upon a time, she was also an extremely arrogant person. But ever since her master brought Mo Qingcheng here, her self-confidence had been shattered bit by bit. This young lady was born with a halo of light around her, but after this halo was revealed, her entire demeanor changed. Now, even Bai Fei didn't dare to look at her directly. Maybe, only that man is the one destined for her, Bai Fei mused. During this period of time, there were many people from the older generations who came to the Pill Emperor Hall, wanting to form a marriage alliance with Mo Qingcheng. However, all of them were rejected by Luo He without any trace of politeness. This continued until the rumor that only Hua Taishu was worthy of Mo Qingcheng. During this period of time, Hua Taishu had paid a visit to Luo He and met with Mo Qingcheng. He didn't say anything, but ever since then, there were many rumors circulating. I wish to go out for a walk. Mo Qingcheng's voice interrupted Bai Fei's train of thought. I will report this to Master, Bai Fei immediately replied, causing Mo Qingcheng to sigh. She wanted to go out for a walk, but couldn't she? After so many days, he should have already left Chu, right? Where would he go to roam the world? Thinking of him, a radiant smile appeared on Mo Qingcheng's face, as she felt a trace of warmth in her heart. The sunlight shone on her radiant smile, as beautiful as the smile on her face when she called out the name, Dumbo, in the snow of winter. His silhouette was like a beam of light. No matter how cold her heart was, that beam of light would always be able to melt the ice and snow. Qin Wendian was still immersed in his cultivation of divine inscriptions. Today, he was in a dreamscape, contemplating the dreamscape painting. Each and every stroke of the strokes depicted the mountains and rivers, as well as the seasons of spring and autumn. Sometimes, Qin Wendian would wonder if the green-robed middle-aged man he met in the dark forest was also a powerful divine inscriptionist. The dreamscape painting depicted the mountains and rivers of the heavens and earth, appearing and disappearing from time to time. Abruptly, Qin Wendian's heart pounded as he stared at the disappearing lines of runic inscriptions. Abruptly, Qin Wendian opened his eyes, only to see Bai Luyi staring at him with a smile on her face. It's rare for you to be able to rest. Bai Luyi, Qin Wendian called out, causing Bai Luyi to freeze as she curiously stared at Qin Wendian. What's wrong? Have you ever thought of reverse inscriptions? Qin Wendian asked. Reverse inscriptions? Bai Luyi's beautiful eyes widened. You know that the divine inscriptions of divine weapons and puppets form a system of their own, and are extremely difficult to decipher. You've also said that when fighting against puppets, they don't know pain, nor do they feel fatigue. Even if you destroy a part of their structure, it's still very difficult to destroy the entirety of the puppet. But if I can sense the structure of the divine inscriptions, I can reverse the inscriptions and reverse them. In that case, regardless of puppets, divine weapons or formations, wouldn't they all be useless? Qin Wendian's eyes shone with a bright light. Bai Luyi's eyes also brightened, but she soon added, but if I want to easily sense the existence of divine inscriptions and reverse them, that's even more difficult compared to forging divine inscriptions. Ha, Bai Luyi, think about how you learned how to inscribe divine inscriptions, Qin Wendian suddenly asked. Naturally, I started from the foundational divine inscriptions, then I copied them and comprehended them step by step, Bai Luyi replied. In that case, can't you use the same method to reverse divine inscriptions? Start from the foundational divine inscriptions and try to decipher them before you comprehend them. Qin Wendian boldly stated his thoughts, causing Bai Luyi's heart to pound wildly. Her beautiful eyes stared unblinkingly at Qin Wendian as she drew in a deep breath. Qin Wendian was truly a genius. His thoughts were too bold, too crazy. And what made Bai Luyi touched was that no matter what thoughts Qin Wendian had, he would always share them with her, allowing her to widen her understanding of divine inscriptions. Qin Wendian couldn't help but tremble when he saw Bai Luyi staring at him. Am I really that handsome? You're so cocky. Bai Luyi giggled. After which, she retrieved a few books from her interspatial ring and passed them to Qin Wendian. For you. What are these? Qin Wendian curiously asked. You'll understand after you read them. They're my daily notes. Bai Luyi smiled. I won't disturb you for the next few days. Take a good look at them. I'll be outside, call me if you need anything. After speaking, Bai Luyi left. Qin Wendian flipped through the notes in his hands. It was indeed handwritten. The handwriting was elegant, and it should have been written by Bai Luyi herself. There were 4 books in total, namely the Foundational Manual, the Combat Manual, the Formation Manual, and the Puppet Manual. Qin Wendian couldn't extricate himself from reading them. He used a few days' worth of time to finish reading them all in a single breath. After he finished reading, Qin Wendian was very clear that he had been tricked by Bai Lu Yi. How were these notes? They were obviously secret manuals, extremely profound and profound. Only, this wasn't the original copy, it was handwritten by Bai Lu Yi. Qin Wendian stood up and walked out of the cavern, only to see Bai Lu Yi in the third cavern. Have you finished reading? Bai Lu Yi asked upon seeing Qin Wendian walking out. Have you been keeping a lookout for me? Qin Wendian asked in a low voice. In the past, there would be occasional visitors, but these few days, no one had appeared. I don't know what you're talking about, Bai Lu Yi denied. Qin Wendian rolled his eyes, walking to her side and returning the secret manual to her. He stared into her eyes, only to see Bai Lu Yi averting her gaze. Seeing that Qin Wendian wasn't willing to give up, she couldn't help but glare at Qin Wendian. What are you looking at? Qin Wendian fell silent upon seeing the adorable look on Bai Lu Yi's face, before replying, thank you. Bai Lu Yi froze, before replying, it's not like I don't have a reward for this. There's an exchange in the eastern region of the moon continent, you have to help me out. Sure. Qin Wendian didn't ask what the exchange was about, he only nodded his head. Don't agree so early, you can only be the champion. Bai Lu Yi laughed. With Qin Wendian's help, her chances of success would be even higher. This exchange wasn't only held in the eastern region, it would be held in the other regions of the moon continent at the same time. At the end, those who succeeded would have the opportunity to follow the transcendent powers of the moon continent to a mysterious place. That place was a treasure trove for divine inscriptionists, and it was rumored that there were all sorts of powerful ancient divine inscriptions there. 4th level and even 5th level divine inscriptions could be found there. Over there, it was rumored that there were even terrifying puppets of the 4th grade, capable of fighting against Heavenly Dipper sovereigns. In the eastern region, not only was the White Deer Institute preparing for this, the Yen clan, Lin clan, and other major powers were also preparing for it. If one were to expand the scope, the entire moon continent, including the Hua clan and the Pill Emperor Hall, were preparing as well. Right, I'll do my best to be the champion. Qin Wendian laughed. Currently, he was more and more confident in his own attainments in the Tao of Divine Inscriptions. After a few months of studying, he had grown much stronger compared to the past. I'll go to the Lin clan to take a look. Qin Wendian spoke. Chu Mang, Fan Lu and Little Rascal were all in the Lin clan, as well as Ling Ning. He had no idea how she was doing right now, it was most likely that she had encountered some difficulties. During this period of time, he had been too engrossed in studying the Tao of Divine Inscriptions. I'll send you out. Bai Lu Yi nodded her head, and the two of them walked out of the White Deer Cavern together. Bai Lu Yi personally sent Qin Wendian off. What Bai Lu Yi and Qin Wendian didn't know was that at this moment, in a lofty pavilion, a group of middle-aged figures stood together. One of them bore a striking resemblance to Bai Lu Yi, and was none other than Bai Lu Yi's father. At this moment, he was rubbing his temples, feeling a slight headache. That last little Yi seems to be very close with that young man. They've been together for a few months now, but they've never left each other's side. A person commented, causing Bai Lu Yi's father to have a bitter smile on his face. His daughter had grown up, she would eventually have to find a boyfriend. However, he didn't know the background of this person, and it seemed that he was an outsider. Bai Lu Yi might seem cold, but she was actually pure and kind. It would be best if she didn't fall for someone else. Let her be, it doesn't matter even if she has a boyfriend. If she's not suitable, we can always correct her, Bai Lu Yi's father replied. Such an outstanding daughter, yet you're so open-minded. I'm even preparing to pull some strings for her, to see if there's a relationship between her and those 4 from the moon continent. That person casually replied, causing the pupils of Bai Lu Yi's father to narrow. He naturally knew who those 4 were. Among the top 36 rankers on the Heavenly Fate rankings, there were 4 from the moon continent. Not only that, they were all extremely young, and hailed from major powers. Regardless of their background, they were all outstanding, especially the person in the lead. It was said that there was someone who wanted to matchmake him with that beautiful maiden from the Pill Emperor Hall. Chapter 241. In the Leng clan, during this period of time, Leng Ning's life wasn't going smoothly. Ever since Yan Kong was humiliated by Qin Wentian, he intentionally went to his uncle to complain. Of course, he didn't say that he was tortured, but rather, he wanted to tell his uncle that the little woman he had chosen, Leng Ning, was actually on very good terms with another man. Hence, Yan Kong's uncle, Yan Tai, sent someone to the Leng clan, telling Leng Ning to obediently go to the Yan clan to look for him. Such an attitude caused Leng Ning, who was originally unwilling, to not dare to go. She knew that as long as she entered the Yan clan, what awaited her would be a nightmare. She didn't know how her uncle would treat her, he might even torture her to death. As a young girl, how would she dare to enter the Yan clan? But to Leng Ning's despair, the people of the Leng clan forced her to go to the Yan clan every day. Even her father came to persuade her to go, and her movements were restricted. This caused Leng Ning to be on the verge of collapse. If the Leng clan continued to force her to go to the Yan clan, she would have no choice but to die. Since she would be tortured to death if she went to the Yan clan, she might as well be straightforward. Some of the servants in the Leng clan felt pity for Leng Ning. Such a beautiful young girl, yet she had to suffer such a cruel fate. This was too cruel to Leng Ning. She should have been able to find a good husband to return to. At this moment, in Leng Ning's courtyard, Leng Ning's father appeared again. Leng Ning, the exchange is about to start. Don't let Yan Tai be completely enraged. Leng Ning's countenance was ice-cold as she stared at her father. Exchange. Just because Yan Tai decided to give us a few slots, you want to sacrifice me? Leng Ning, what do you mean by sacrifice? Yan Tai is an extremely powerful third-ranked Grandmaster weaponsmith. How many people would want to get close to him? You are going to marry him, and this is such a good opportunity. The clan has already taken care of you, Leng Ning's cousin, Leng Lin, spoke in a strange tone. If it's so good, why didn't you go ahead and marry him? Why did you push it to me? Leng Ning coldly laughed. Who asked me to find my own husband? Leng Lin leaned against the young man beside her, her head slightly raised as she looked at Leng Ning arrogantly. Leng Ning, you should know how important the refinement grounds are to our clan. Right now, our clan doesn't have any powerful divine inscriptionists. If we want to obtain a placing, we can only rely on Yan Tai's strength. Leng Ning's father continued to persuade. What a joke. Since there's no one powerful enough, so what if they get a spot? In the end, you're still reduced to a supporting role. When has it ever been the overlord forces that have benefited the most from the trial? When has it ever been the Leng family's turn? What's even more laughable is that you're begging others for a few spots to enter. You're really shameless. Leng Ning's heart was filled with despair. Her heart had already turned cold towards this clan. Fatty Fan Lu was right, she should have left long ago. There was no hope at all. Leng Ning. At this moment, a voice abruptly drifted over, causing Leng Ning's expression to stiffen. After which, she recognized the owner of the voice. When she thought of that arrogant fellow, the coldness in her eyes vanished as a smile appeared on her face. She then sprinted out of the courtyard. What are you doing? The cold father shouted. It's none of your business. How could Leng Ning care? Behind her, little rascal's speed wasn't any slower than hers, as it sprinted towards the exit of the Leng residence. Qin Wentian was extremely depressed. After he arrived at the Leng residence, the guards actually didn't allow him to enter. Although he had stayed here for a period of time, the guards should know that he was Leng Ning's friend, yet they still didn't allow him to enter. This caused Qin Wentian to feel that Leng Ning's situation wasn't too good. A white silhouette leapt into his embrace. Qin Wentian gently stroked little rascal's head as he smiled. Did you miss me? Yi. A voice rang out in Qin Wentian's mind. Little rascal's head kept burrowing deeper into his chest, causing Qin Wentian to smile. An extremely haggard voice rang out in front of Qin Wentian. Upon seeing Qin Wentian, she tidied up her messy hair as she smiled sweetly at Qin Wentian. I thought you would never be able to come out from the land of gentleness. Haven't you been living a wonderful life recently? It's been all right. Qin Wentian lightly nodded his head, as carefree as ever. This caused Leng Ning to roll her eyes at him, completely convinced. He actually had the cheek to nod his head and admit it. Actually, Qin Wentian was only thinking that he had made great progress in the Tao of Divine Inscriptions during this period of time. How could it not be wonderful? You haven't been living well. Qin Wentian felt some guilt in his heart as he stared at Leng Ning's haggard appearance. He had been so busy studying divine inscriptions that he had completely forgotten about Leng Ning. It's alright, it's just that I'm not used to having you by my side to talk big, Leng Ning joked. Qin Wentian shifted his gaze slightly, glancing behind Leng Ning, only to see her father walking out together with Leng Lin and that young man from the Leng clan. Their countenances were all extremely unsightly, and this made Qin Wentian understand that Leng Ning was forcing herself to smile. Hee, I didn't think you would still dare to appear. Leng Ning's father coldly laughed upon seeing Qin Wentian. Yen Tai's anger was probably because of the rumors that this young man in front of him had an ambiguous relationship with his daughter. Qin Wentian felt somewhat depressed. Why didn't he dare to appear? Sister, is it because of him that you are unwilling to marry into the Yen clan? Leng Lin walked up with a smile. After offending Yen Tai, you still dare to come out after hiding for so long? After hearing these words, Qin Wentian understood. Yen Tai must be the old demon Leng Ning had told him about back then. As for why he had offended Yen Tai, Yen Kong definitely had something to do with it. Since Yen Kong couldn't find Qin Wentian for revenge, he decided to look for his uncle to deal with Qin Wentian. Qin Wentian didn't look at Leng Lin. This woman was so young, yet she was already so arrogant. Most probably, it had something to do with the environment she grew up in. What do you think? Qin Wentian asked Leng Ning, completely ignoring Leng Lin. This caused Leng Lin to furrow her brows. This man was truly arrogant, even in front of her house, he still dared to be so arrogant. Leng Ning's beautiful eyes stared at Qin Wentian. Although there was a trace of desire in her heart, the Yen clan was too powerful. Yen Tai was also an extremely difficult character to deal with. Although Qin Wentian was a third-ranked grandmaster, how could he be compared to Yen Tai? She also didn't want to drag Qin Wentian down with her. This had nothing to do with Qin Wentian. He and Bai Lu should be a match made in heaven. Leng Ning mused. After which, she inclined her head and smiled at Qin Wentian, you and Fan Lu should move out. My place is too messy, it's not suitable for you to continue living here. Hee, sister, you're more sensible. Leng Lin laughed. It seemed like Leng Ning also knew that Yen Tai wasn't someone she could afford to antagonize. She was prepared to sever all ties with him. No matter how unwilling she would still have to marry into the Yen clan. If Leng Ning didn't go, she would be in danger. This lass. Qin Wentian couldn't help but sigh in his heart when he saw how Leng Ning was avoiding his gaze. This lass that he had met for the first time wasn't only straightforward, but her heart was also very kind. Third-ranked grandmaster. Qin Wentian murmured in his heart. After which, he stepped forward and held on to Leng Ning's hand, causing her to tremble slightly. Her beautiful eyes stared unblinkingly at Qin Wentian. Only to see Qin Wentian flashing a radiant smile as he spoke in a low voice, things aren't as complicated as you think. After which, Qin Wentian shifted his gaze onto Leng Ning's father, Leng Ning is my girlfriend. If Yen Tai wants her, just tell him to come look for me. After leaving behind this sentence, Qin Wentian couldn't be bothered with his father anymore. Such a father was truly disappointing. Holding on to Leng Ning's hand, Qin Wentian walked towards the Leng clan. Leng Ning's beautiful eyes shone with a radiant light as she stared at Qin Wentian. Her heart pounded madly. This fellow was still so fond of talking big. How good at acting, it was as though he didn't care about anything at all. However, she felt that the arrogant Qin Wentian was actually so adorable. If I can really become his girlfriend, it wouldn't be too bad either. Leng Ning mused in her heart. After which, she felt a burning sensation on her face. It seemed like she had gone crazy, to actually have such thoughts. Fatty Fan Lo, who had tagged along, couldn't help but wipe away his tears when he saw Leng Ning obediently holding onto Qin Wentian's hand. Wasn't this guy a little too arrogant? Did he think the Leng clan was his home? Leng Ning's father and Leng Lin were dumbfounded by Qin Wentian's words. Wasn't this fellow a little too arrogant? Did he think the Leng clan was his home? If Yen Tai wanted Leng Ning, he could just look for him. Would he be able to bear the responsibility? Oi, are you still not going to let go? After returning to the courtyard, Leng Ning rolled her eyes at Qin Wentian. Qin Wentian loosened his grip as he rubbed his nose. Humph, you are so direct. Why didn't you ask if I agreed or not? Leng Ning said with disdain. However, there wasn't the slightest hint of anger on her face. Evidently, she was just joking. If Qin Wentian really wanted her to be his girlfriend, Leng Ning would definitely agree. Why don't you reject me? Qin Wentian stared at Leng Ning. You. Leng Ning was completely speechless when she saw the expression on Qin Wentian's face. Didn't this bastard know how to have tender and protective feelings for the fairer sex? He should at least give her some face as a woman. Too much of a bastard, too arrogant. Leng Ning gritted her teeth in hatred. Fine, I'll just take it that I'm taking advantage of you. After this matter is settled, you can just dump me. Qin Wentian knew that Leng Ning was after all a young lady. He couldn't possibly allow Leng Ning to take the initiative and ask him to pretend to be her boyfriend, right? To a young lady like her, this was indeed a little too difficult. That's more like it. Leng Ning smiled in satisfaction. Oh right, Leng Ning, I remember you said that the clan originally chose Leng Lin. If that's the case, then things are simple. Since your clan can change people, then you can also change back. Qin Wentian shrugged his shoulders. Thinking back to Leng Lin's harsh words, he felt somewhat unhappy. If she continued to harass him, then things would get interesting. Leng Ning's beautiful eyes flickered when she heard Qin Wentian's words. She looked at Qin Wentian and laughed, you are too bad. However, this idea seemed to be quite good. Chapter 242. Leng Ning's father and Leng Lin had no intentions of letting Leng Ning off. As long as she didn't return to the Yen clan, Leng Ning's father would have to endure the pressure of the Yen clan. Because of his low cultivation base, Leng Ning's status in the clan was extremely low. This was the reason why the Yen clan dared to marry Leng Ning to Yen Tai. Strength determined one's status, status determined one's treatment. As for Leng Lin, even if Leng Ning didn't leave, she wouldn't be able to rest easy. After all, before Leng Ning, the Yen clan had already chosen her. A smile that was not a smile involuntarily appeared on Leng Ning's face when she saw Leng Lin and the rest walking over. Although in her mind, Qin Wentian was someone who liked to talk big, she felt a sense of security whenever she was beside him. Maybe it was because of his innate self-confidence that gave her a sense of security. He was always as carefree as the clouds and the wind, as though nothing in the world could affect him. However, if you angered him, he would make you tremble in fear, making you regret it. Just like Yen Kong. What a lovely couple. Leng Lin's strange voice rang out again. She smiled, Leng Ning, you better think this through carefully. When the time comes, not only will you have to bear the wrath of Senior Yen Tai, your little lover will be in a miserable state as well. Does this have anything to do with you? Leng Lin questioned, causing Leng Lin to be stunned. This lass seemed to have become unyielding. Of course it has something to do with me. After all, I'm doing this for your happiness. Being able to marry someone like Senior Yen Tai is my good fortune. Leng Lin narrowed her eyes, giving off a crafty feeling. Are you sure that marrying Yen Tai is a good fortune? Qin Wentian stared at Leng Lin as he seriously asked. Leng Lin furrowed her brows. Of course. If that's the case, then I can be at ease. I was still worried that you might feel wronged, but since you said that marrying Yen Tai is a good fortune, we will wholeheartedly give you our blessings. Qin Wentian laughed, causing Leng Lin's eyes to flash with a cold light. I'm not the one getting married, she's the one getting married. I don't have the fortune to enjoy it, I'll leave it to you, sister. After Qin Wentian's reminder, Leng Ning finally understood why Leng Lin had been forcing her to go to the Yen family as soon as possible. It was all for her own peace of mind. The young man beside Leng Lin furrowed his brows as a baleful aura flickered in his eyes. Qin Wentian and Leng Lin's attitude made him extremely unhappy. Wanting his woman to marry him. Was this an insult to him? Do you know the meaning of, a loose tongue causes trouble? The young man glanced at Qin Wentian, and the corners of his lips curled up in a cold manner. Qin Wentian glanced at the young man before shifting his gaze away. Since she herself said that marrying Yen Tai is a blessing, let's get the Leng clan to choose a new candidate. I think she is more suitable. Can you all leave now? Hee hee. Leng Lin laughed coldly as she leaned on the arm of the young man. What an arrogant fellow. The cold smile on the young man's face deepened. After which, he held on to Leng Lin's hand as he turned and walked away. Remember your words, I will pass on this message to the Leng clan. Walking to the entrance of the courtyard, the young man continuously stepped out. Abruptly, lines of astral inscriptions appeared on the ground, twisting and turning into the shape of a long spear. Abruptly, the young man turned, and with a single step, a terrifyingly sharp spear pierced through the air, aiming straight for Qin Wentian. Who? The countenance of Leng Lin's father was extremely ugly to behold. A peak-level second-ranked divine inscription could actually be inscribed with such proficiency. With a wave of his hand, Qin Wentian blocked the long spear. A peak-level second-ranked divine inscription only had the might of a peak-level arterial circulation divine inscription. Third-ranked divine inscriptions corresponded to the Yuanfu realm. Do you know the grade of this divine inscription? The young man flicked his sleeves, exuding an incomparably arrogance. Leng Lin stared at Qin Wentian as she laughed. Being able to inscribe a peak-level second-ranked divine inscription at such a young age, his talent was definitely extraordinary. In the future, he would definitely become a third-ranked divine inscriptionist and be worshipped by the clan. After speaking, the young man turned around, intending to leave. However, at this moment, the sounds of footsteps rang out from behind him, causing him to furrow his brows. A sharp whistling sound rang out, breaking through the air and shooting towards him. The young man abruptly spun around and lifted his palms, unleashing an attack. A terrifying great rock whistled through the air as the sounds of collision rang out. The young man was forced to retreat repeatedly, and with a piercing sound, his robes were torn apart as a bloody wound appeared on his chest. Finally slaying the shadow of the great rock, the young man was in a sorry state. Inclining his head, he stared at Qin Wentian, only to see Qin Wentian calmly standing there. Beneath Qin Wentian's feet, the silhouette of a gigantic great rock appeared. What you inscribed, can it be called divine inscriptions? Qin Wentian mocked as he stared at the sorry figure of the young man. However, at this moment, the countenance of the young man drastically changed as he stared at Qin Wentian in shock. How was this possible? How could he be able to inscribe third-ranked divine inscriptions? He was extremely clear of his own attainments in the Tao of divine inscriptions. Not only that, the reason he came to the Leng clan this time around wasn't because of Leng Lin, but rather, it was because he wanted to obtain a slot to enter that place. Leng Lin's countenance abruptly turned pale as she stared numbly at the scene in front of her. Her body trembled involuntarily. It's over. Leng Lin stared at Qin Wentian with a smile that was not a smile in his eyes. Leng Ning, this lass, had found a third-ranked divine inscriptionist. How could the Leng clan bear to allow Leng Ning to marry Yen Tai? This was no different from offending a third-rank divine inscriptionist like Qin Wentian. Back then, it was precisely because of the existence of her boyfriend that the Leng clan had considered replacing her. But now, thinking of this, Leng Lin's entire body turned cold. Only now did she realize what the conversation between her and Qin Wentian earlier meant. Scram. Qin Wentian impolitely spat out a single word. The young man's countenance turned pale as he pulled Leng Lin's hand and left. Leng Ning's father stood at the side in a daze, staring at the young man in front of him. Was this his daughter's girlfriend? Who? Drawing in a deep breath, a smile appeared on the face of Leng Ning's father. Ning, you should know that I, your father, have my own difficulties. My status in the clan isn't high, I have no way to object to whatever the clan wants me to do. Can you leave now? Leng Ning coldly asked her father. Her father's voice faltered for a moment before he nodded to Qin Wentian and left. Hee, status in the clan. Why don't you even dare to argue for it? The pressure the clan is giving you is nothing more than not providing you with any cultivation resources. Can't you just rely on yourself? How laughable. Leng Ning's eyes reddened as Qin Wentian patted her on the shoulder. Slowly shifting her gaze over, Leng Ning contemplated Qin Wentian. Suddenly, a smile appeared on her face, as radiant as the sun. Thank you, it's so good to have you. Leng Ning's heart warmed. This feeling of being protected by someone, she had never felt it before. It's fine, who asked me to have tender, protective feelings for the fairer sex, Qin Wentian shrugged as he laughed, causing Leng Ning to roll her eyes at him. Stop being so smug. Oh yes, since you revealed your talent as a third-rank divine inscriptionist, the clan would definitely want you to represent the Leng clan to participate in the exchange. Leng Ning suddenly recalled something as she spoke to Qin Wentian. Exchange. Qin Wentian mumbled in a low voice. Bai Lui had also mentioned this before, but he was afraid that he wouldn't be able to agree to the Leng clan's request. After all, he had already promised Bai Lui that he would help her obtain first place. The exchange in the eastern region of the Moon continent is organized by the Transcendent Power, the Star-Seizing Manor. They will gather a group of divine inscriptionists to assist them in entering a secret realm, and the top 3 rankers will have the qualifications to bring a few people along with them. The first ranker will have 10 slots, the second ranker will have 8 slots, and the third ranker will have 6 slots. Not only in the eastern region, but the other regions of the Moon continent will also be hosting an exchange to select participants to enter the secret realm with the transcendent powers. The Leng clan wanted to grab hold of this opportunity, hence they wanted to ask Yen Tai for a few slots. Yen Tai is one of the most popular contenders in the eastern region, Leng Ning explained to Qin Wentian. Combining Bai Luyi's words, Qin Wentian gradually understood the situation. So it turned out that the Leng clan had sacrificed Leng Ning to Yen Tai for the sake of these slots. How cruel. If it was only to give the Leng clan a few slots, there wouldn't be much of a problem. Over the next few days, members of the Leng clan paid a visit to Qin Wentian, causing Leng Ning to deeply understand the fickleness of human nature. Wentian, that last Leng Ning has always been obedient and beautiful since she was young. Now that she has found such a good husband like you, I'm truly at ease. Leng Ning's grandfather spoke in a heavy tone to Qin Wentian, with a smile on his face, as though he was truly a benevolent elder. However, Leng Ning told Qin Wentian that this grandfather of hers rarely saw her. He had many descendants, and among them, there was no lack of outstanding talent. Leng Ning could only stand by the side. When the Leng clan wanted Leng Ning to marry Yen Tai, her grandfather had also agreed. In his eyes, Leng Ning was nothing more than a tool. Qin Wentian feigned civility as he nodded his head. As for the Yen clan, I've already sent people to negotiate with them. You can rest assured. Leng Ning's grandfather had a wide smile on his face. However, at this moment, a person hurriedly walked over, causing old Master Leng to furrow his brows. What's going on? That person glanced at Qin Wentian and Leng Ning, but he didn't say anything. Wentian and Leng Ning are not outsiders, feel free to speak your mind. Old Master Leng commanded. Yes. That person nodded as he continued, as for the Yen clan, Yen Tai doesn't agree to the exchange. He said that he wants Leng Ning, and as for Qin Wentian, it's best that the Leng clan doesn't get involved with him. If not, we'll meet again at the exchange. Old Master Leng's countenance abruptly changed. That kind gaze of his suddenly turned sharp, flickering with uncertainty. It was unknown what he was thinking. Was Yen Tai crazy? Their Leng clan had already promised him many benefits, yet he actually didn't agree to the exchange? Is there no room for negotiation? Old Master Leng coldly asked. Yen Tai's words were resolute and decisive. Not only that, he told the Leng clan to send Leng Ning over as soon as possible. If not, we'll see what happens next. He even said, he told a certain someone to prepare to die. That person lowered his head, causing Old Master Leng's countenance to turn increasingly unsightly. These words were indeed Yen Tai's style. As for the certain someone, he was naturally referring to Qin Wentian. If that was the case, between Yen Tai and Qin Wentian, one of them would definitely be offended. Qin Wentian, a young third-ranked grandmaster, had a bright future ahead of him. Yen Tai, a mature and powerful third-ranked grandmaster, would definitely surpass Qin Wentian. If they chose Qin Wentian, it would be equivalent to giving up on the exchange. Not only that, they still had to protect Qin Wentian, because Yen Tai wanted Qin Wentian's life. I'll take my leave first. Old Master Leng reluctantly bade farewell to Qin Wentian before he departed. Qin Wentian's eyes flickered. From the change in Old Master Leng's attitude, he was able to deduce some things. Also, that Yen Tai was truly too arrogant. You're tuning in to the Blissful Bookshelf YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.